Salciunas. This is Kincade and Salciunas. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Well, we're another day removed from the Eagles being NFC East divisional champions, but that not the goal. Now we turn our eyes towards the postseason with a lot of starters potentially sitting, or hopefully all of them, this Sunday against the Giants. Have we seen everything we've needed to see? Is the book closed on the Eagles' regular season? We will discuss. I'm Connor Thomas, sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. Andrew DeCecco to my left. So, a fun New Year's Eve here on Kincade and Salciunas coming up right now here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
This is Kincade and Salciunas.
NFC East Division champion, 2 seed.
I'm celebrating it, but bigger picture. The whole team says it, so why can't I say it?
Okay, well, the whole team has to go back to practice. We get a week. We get 2 weeks to go ahead and celebrate this, winning the division.
Yeah, but you're acting like I didn't celebrate that 4 weeks ago when I already knew that this was going to happen.
Kincade and Salciunas. John Kincade, Andrew Salciunas.
97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
And a good Tuesday morning to everyone out there across the Delaware Valley. I'm Connor Thomas, sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. Got to take the day off to look after young Cooper Salciunas, so he'll be back in on Thursday. To my left, Andrew DeCecco. And we've got you for this New Year's Eve morning show on Kincade and Salciunas. Andrew, how you doing this morning?
CT, I'm doing well. Good to be with you. Excited for the show.
Yeah, you've been a busy guy. I appreciate you taking the time to pop in here. We had a last-minute schedule change with Andrew being out. John and Andrew will both be back on Thursday, so everyone off tomorrow for the New Year's Day holiday. And then Kincade and Salciunas will be back in earnest after all those guys get done burning through their vacation days, and we'll get back with you on Thursday. But we've got a fun show planned for you today, and I think this is a really interesting conversation that takes the whole step of should the starters play in the final regular season game to another level. We talked a lot yesterday about the Saquon Barkley discussion, and you were in for an hour with us, Andrew, and whether or not he should play on Sunday to chase down Eric Dickerson's all-time rushing record. We talked about what that would mean for other starters having to play, and with nothing left to decide in the seeding as far as the Philadelphia Eagles are concerned, you don't need to play anybody. This game means absolutely nothing. Last night, the Lions take down the 49ers. It wasn't the best effort by them, but against a 49ers team that has had a really, really rough year, is good enough for the victory. And now you see Minnesota, you see Detroit. They will play for the 1 seed in Week 18, but whatever happens in that game, even a tie, they're going to be ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles in the standings to the point where you cannot advance up any higher in the seeding. It is the 2 seed for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, the smart thing to do, we all agreed yesterday, at least on the air, and there may be some folks out there that would disagree, and we can continue to have this conversation. It's going to be something that we talk about all week long. Should the starters play? Should Saquon play? I know that we haven't exactly solved that problem amongst Philadelphia Eagles fans. There are still a contingency of this fan base that believes that Saquon should go after the record and the coaching staff should allow him to, but we are in agreement that Sunday would be a good time to get rest and try and avoid injury, and the only way to guarantee that is by not playing anybody. So we could have seen the Philadelphia Eagles starters, and basically any player that matters, play for the final time in the regular season. And when you sit here and you think about the road to come in the postseason, the immediate question that begs is, have we seen everything we need to see from the Philadelphia Eagles starters in the regular season? Are there any questions left remaining? That is our big question to start the show today. Do you have anything where we sit right now where you say, yeah, it was an amazing regular season. They did everything they needed to do to lock up the 2 seed and the division, and even though they didn't get the 1 seed in home field all the way through, we're going to talk at some point today about why it could very well still be an NFC Championship game at Lincoln Financial Field when everything is all said and done. 2 seed gives you 2 home playoff games if you continue to advance, at least maybe 3. There may be some people out there that say, well, I wish I would have seen this. I still have a question about blank. And if you have those, feel free to join in, 610-632-0975. Now, as we frame this conversation about potentially seeing the starters for the last time, it's important to hear from the head coach who spoke yesterday, and we knew a lot of the questioning was going to be, who's playing and who are you sitting? against the Giants in Week 18, and we didn't get a straight answer, but when asked about guys playing, Nick Sirianni had this to say yesterday.
Still not there, and then, obviously I gave the players off today. They'll be back in a couple days, or they'll be back in. By the next time I talk to you, they'll be back in, and so I'll always inform them before I inform anybody else. But, still sorting through things right now at this particular moment.
So, Andrew, you see more than anybody on these airwaves. You're down there at the NovaCare complex. You're in the locker room after games. You talk to these players. You talk to the team. You would be the number one guy that I would want to ask if there are any questions left unanswered. And as fate has it, you're the guy sitting next to me today. So lead us off on this topic. Is there anything left that you would have wanted to see, anything you need to see, or is everything wrapped up with a nice bow just a couple days after Christmas?
No, I mean, prior to the Steelers game, Connor, I would say that the one thing I wanted to see was the passing game look more rhythmic, look more functional, and not as choppy as maybe it has been for most of the season. But they checked off that box as well. There's nothing else that I need to see to really skew my opinion one way or the other. This is a bona fide Super Bowl roster. I view the Eagles as the best team in the NFL. Perhaps I'm a bit close to it, a bit too close to it, having seen them grow and develop as a team from the spring all the way through training camp. And to this point right now, but I don't think they need to prove anything else. I think right now the primary objective should be sit your starters, especially that offensive line that have been dominant this year. A lot of those guys have been nicked up, and then focus on the postseason because, as it appears, they have a really tough draw in Game 1.
Yeah, Green Bay, who we're going to talk about, that's a tough matchup for the Eagles. So later on in the show, we're going to discuss how dangerous the Green Bay Packers could be. Now, that still could change. It could be Washington. There is a Week 18 scenario where those teams could flip in the standings. But right now, as things stand, you'd have the Green Bay Packers coming here, and that would only be because their division is so top-heavy with the Lions up there and the Vikings up there, two potential one-seed teams. Now, one of those teams is going to be a 5-seed, which the NFC North is nuts this year. But if you draw Green Bay, which is how it's looking right now, that's going to be an interesting matchup that we need to take a look at today. If I'm trying to find a question about the Philadelphia Eagles, and I am, because I don't feel comfortable going into the NFL playoffs, knowing how difficult it is to make a Super Bowl run, to hoist the Lombardi. Only one time in franchise history, in case you've forgotten, have the Eagles accomplished that feat. There's got to be like something that we're looking at where we say, okay, this is something to focus on. It doesn't feel good to feel good. And maybe that's the Philadelphian in me. But to say, yeah, we got no problems. We're as good as any team in football. We're comfortable with everything heading into the postseason. Does make me feel like we're overlooking things. But logic would dictate that that is the way you should feel about this team. So if I had to pick a question, I don't even think I can go with the defense of young players. I don't think I could bring up like a rookie wall. That might have been something that people were worried about after the Washington game, what they did against Dallas. I know not the world's greatest offense there with Cooper Rush leading it and no CeeDee Lamb. It was still an incredible, incredible performance by the defense, and they're starting to take the ball away at an incredible rate. I could question
the pass
health.
rush.
Yeah.
Pass rush, perhaps.
Pass rush, maybe. Yeah, but even that, I mean,
like they'd come up empty last week, and I think the previous week they didn't really show up against the Commanders.
Right.
So it's something that has been sporadic, but they've been able to find ways to atone for that in other ways, taking the football away, 9 turnovers in the past 2 games. So it's not a problem until it's a problem. So that's something that could surface in the postseason, though, if you can't get to some of those upper echelon quarterbacks.
Yeah, but in NFL defense, it's not a box of Legos, right? You know when you get one of those like Lego figurines that tells you exactly how to put it together and build it from the ground up. You could build a defense in any direction. It could start with the pass rush or it could start with the secondary. And this Eagles team has proven that their secondary can withstand not getting pressure on the quarterback. Ideally, you want everything working, but when you look at the defensive backs that you have on this team and the way they've been playing lately, I know Jaden Daniels had a great game against them 2 weeks ago, but that was a situation where you lose guys due to ejection and injury.
Xavier Leggett got behind him in the Panthers game as well.
Yes, but, I mean, in that game still, I think they played a strong defensive game. It was just a big play at a big moment, and luckily he dropped the ball. I think that the secondary has given you enough faith that you don't even have to worry about the pass rush. The special teams questions about Jake Elliott, it feels minimal to say, like, the kicker might be the biggest question, but he's been better over the past couple weeks. Like, I'm struggling to find true bona fide worries about this Philadelphia Eagles team. There are some things on the fringes, though, that we just ran through that could be a bit of a concern for some people. And if you have those, well, this is the day to run through it and get it out and say, okay, well, we're done watching them in the regular season. Most likely, if you believe that Nick Sirianni is going to rest his starters, which I think you should believe that. Are we comfortable with where the Eagles are at? And is there anything still that you're like, man, I wish I would have seen that, and this gives me any type of pause in the postseason? Because if you have major questions about this team, you have not been following them the way that I think we have in the regular season. They've been doing everything, man. Absolutely everything.
It's the most balanced team in the NFL, in my opinion. The NFL's top defense and an offense that can score. They could have put up 50 against the Commanders. They can score 50 on a given week if Jalen Hurts, of course, is back there at quarterback.
They could have put up 60 on the Dallas Cowboys with their second-string and third-string quarterbacks. Like, if they had played that game out, they just could have continued to keep scoring. And, like, put Jalen Hurts in that equation, and next thing you know, it is an absolutely insane offense that the Philadelphia Eagles have. Balance is a great word for it. And you brought up something earlier, too, with the passing game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and seeing that because that was following the Panthers week where A.J. Brown talked about the passing being the problem with the offense. And the next thing you know, there's all this question about, well, do they have to throw the ball to win? And then they went out and did it in the nick of time, mind you. Because could you imagine if you went in, you didn't have that game against the Steelers, and then you went in next week and played the Commanders, and Jalen Hurts gets concussed 11 plays in, and then you're in a situation where we haven't seen him throw the ball at that level for a while, and then he's going to sit in Week 18. We would have a legitimate discussion, and I would be leading the charge of Jalen Hurts needs to play a half in Week 18 to show us that he can go ahead and throw the football at the level we need him to, because we haven't seen it from him yet this year. I would feel significantly less comfortable. But the Eagles just seem to, every time this year, they've had a major question brought up about a certain part of the team. Not only have they answered it, they've answered it like immediately the next game.
Resounding fashion.
Exactly. So it's a great thing. All of these lead to and point to one thing. You should be very, very happy and comfortable to be rooting for this Philadelphia Eagles team as we head towards the NFL postseason. But I know how that works in Philadelphia. There's never a full level of comfort. And in the NFL, there's never a sure thing. So that's our main topic for today. Again, the question, if Sunday, this past Sunday, was the last time we've seen the Eagles starters play in the regular season, have you seen everything you need to see? And if your answer is yes, that's great. Listen, we're still celebrating the division title. I know the hats and T-shirts probably got taken off as the guys left the locker room and they're back to work and they're focused on how can we either get rest over the next couple weeks, or how can we, if you're a backup on the team, prepare to play a game when you probably haven't played a lot all year. For us, sitting here in this radio studio, we can celebrate the NFCs for the next 2 weeks, and you heard me bring it up in the open. So if you still want to celebrate that and just say, no, I have no questions, that's fine as well. But we're going to build on this idea of the playoff questions, right? The Eagles don't seem to have many. I want to run an exercise throughout the show where we take a look at the other teams in the NFC playoff picture. And what we're looking for is one thing. Now, there may be a billion questions when you look at a team like Washington, when you look at a team like Atlanta. But I want to look at what teams have at least one bigger question than the Philadelphia Eagles. One facet of their team that should make them more nervous, more susceptible to getting knocked out than the Philadelphia Eagles, a consistently great football team for a large part of the regular season. So with that in mind, let's start from the top. Now, we're going to give the Detroit Lions the benefit of the doubt. I know that Minnesota has been on a tear all year long, but Detroit has been like the clear one seed for most of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's a very good chance that Minnesota beats them on Sunday in their house, which would be a big loss for Detroit to have to go to the 5 seed. Bottom line, Detroit Lions, bigger questions than the Eagles? Absolutely.
Definitely.
And our mind goes to the same place.
Definitely. So they surrendered over 400 yards of offense to a team in the 49ers that literally had nothing to play for. Brock Purdy threw for almost 400 yards. They couldn't run the ball very effectively, Connor, but Ricky Pearsall really had a big game. George Kittle had a big game. So they were leaking oil. They proved very vulnerable in the passing game. And you can only withstand so many injuries before it's to the point where you're replacing them with, back of the roster players, and you're not able to kind of keep pace with some of the more preeminent offenses in the NFL like the Eagles. I just don't see a path in which they're even able to get to the NFC title game as currently constituted. It just seems like everyone's ready to pencil them in, but I'm not so sure that they don't get knocked out before they get there.
I mean, that's a heck of a claim that a team that's been in the 1 seed all year might not even get to the NFC Championship game when they've had everything in front of them for what feels like 2 months. But
I think they peaked a little bit too early.
It does seem that. Well, I don't even know that I could say that, because if I say peak too early, that seems to indicate, like, it reminds me of the Phillies, who were playing well and then just hit a rut and couldn't figure it out, and were having their own internal issues as far as figuring out how to play good baseball. Like, the Lions have not fallen off because they ran into problems about how they're putting their scheme together or how they're executing on the field. They ran into problems because half their team's dead. Like, they just don't have the bodies, it seems, to withstand the grueling task it is to advance through the NFL playoffs. And the NFC is no light work this year. Injuries for the Lions, a bigger question facing them than anything facing the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's already the team that could be the 1 seed. You have a bigger question looking at them than you could ever conjure up with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think we could pick another good one for the Minnesota Vikings, who are the other team vying for the 1 seed. I'm interested if your number one question about the Minnesota Vikings is mine, and probably should be everybody's if you know anything about NFL football and the difference between the regular season and the postseason.
Sam Darnold.
Absolutely right.
When the lights are really bright and the stakes are highest, we have to see which version of Sam Darnold shows up. The one that we've seen with the Panthers and the Jets, of course, or the version that we've seen through the regular season, which he's probably going to get comeback player of the year. But like you said, there's a big discrepancy between the regular season and the postseason. And until I see it, yes, he does have Justin Jefferson. I understand that. But I'm just not a believer. Call me crazy, but I think the sample size in Sam Darnold's career, Connor, is large enough for me to suggest that, yeah, call me crazy, but I'm not buying into the hype just yet. I think that eventually there's going to come a time where he's going to revert back to the Sam Darnold that we've all seen really since 2019.
No, I don't think he'll go that far back. Like, I think this year has been impressive enough for Sam Darnold to say, like, that dude's a darn good quarterback. And he has the pedigree. Coming out of USC and where he was drafted by the Jets, he went to 2 bad organizations. And it says more about those organizations than I think it does Sam Darnold as a quarterback. You saw Carolina had a quarterback room of Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And now both of those guys look like high-level quarterbacks, and Carolina's trying to figure out if Bryce Young's a guy. But it's not so much like Sam Darnold he stinks, and this is all fool's gold. He's never played in a postseason game in his career. He's never been in this spot to be a quarterback who says, okay, we're playing a win-or-go-home game against some top-level competition, and then if we win that game, we got to do it again next week and the week after that. And I just this whole playoff experience thing is the real deal. You look at just about every great quarterback, they had to go through some type of postseason loss, some type of failure before they started to figure out, okay, now I know how to handle this on the postseason level. It doesn't happen the first time for basically anybody. So Sam Darnold being a question, like, we don't have that question about Jalen Hurts. Hurts has been in the postseason multiple times. He has played quarterback in a Super Bowl. He has been a guy that is comfortable in the big moments. So a bigger question for the Minnesota Vikings than we have for the Philadelphia Eagles. You see what this exercise does, folks? I think, and those are the 2 teams that could finish ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles in the standings, and it did not take us more than a millisecond to come up with questions for them that are bigger than anything facing the Eagles. Now, questions are not guarantees. I'm not saying I can sit here today and say, well, there's no way the Minnesota Vikings win because Sam Darnold is their quarterback. There's no way the Lions, who are still a talented team and have won in spite of their injuries, can still do this. But the odds would seem to point in the direction of the team with the less questions, and the Philadelphia Eagles very well could be that team.
Yeah, we're not underselling these teams, to be clear. But one question that I have as I've watched the Minnesota Vikings throughout the year, will the Vikings in crunch time get the 2024 regular season version of Sam Darnold, or will they get the 2017 postseason version of Case Keenum?
Yeah, exactly. That's the guy I think about every time, because Case Keenum had an incredible regular season in 2017, and then the postseason rolls around, and frankly, solid in the postseason to start, and then he came to the link in the NFC Championship game. We all remember how that one went, 38-7. Rough performance by him, rough performance by the Vikings in general. You're going to run into a better team at some point, or a team equal to you, and then you're going to have to do it a second week, and that multiple times in a row is something that the Vikings, I don't know if they can do. Their quality of wins this year, not the most impressive. The Eagles, on the other hand, if you're saying, well, can the Eagles beat two great teams in a row? Yeah, they definitely can. They can go out and do that. We saw them in a span of 3 weeks go out and beat the Ravens and the Steelers.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen them go on the road. Rams, Ravens back-to-back. Like, that's two impressive wins. You're looking at a situation where if you can beat two postseason teams back-to-back, two division champion teams in the Rams and the Ravens, like, that's all you need to see to know this team can put together an extended postseason run.
Yeah, and I also want to circle back to the Lions because we talked about injuries, Connor, but I would also say you have to look at head coach Dan Campbell as well, who's prone to making pretty egregious decisions in critical moments. So that's something that could also hold them back.
I was not planning on going to this place, but that gives us something to talk about coming up next because the coaching situation could be a question for some Eagles fans still with Nick Sirianni. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to continue to evaluate the Birds as we go through these questions for other teams, but we will continue to break down the Eagles compared to their postseason opponents and where the bigger concerns lie. Another fun exercise we're going to open up on the other side. I was just thinking about this last night, partially because the Eagles don't have an opponent really to focus on this week, but the opponent they are focusing on, the New York Giants, made a major future misstep in Week 17 by beating the Indianapolis Colts, taking themselves out of the 1 overall pick for the time being. And it had me thinking, where are the Eagles as far as teams that you would like to be going forward? No, not just this year, not just 2025, which starts tomorrow. No, when we're looking at the extended outlook for NFL franchises, are there many teams that the Eagles would trade places with? I don't think there are. And we'll put together a definitive ranking here, definitive only by our standards. But we'll do that throughout the show today as well. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Salciunas, and we are back after this from more Kincade Salciunas right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
To play or not to play? I'm Brendan Gunn, and this update is brought to you by Groundworks, your expert for basement waterproofing and foundation repair since 1997. Book your free inspection today at groundworks.com. After Week 17 around the NFL, the Eagles are now locked into the 2 seed in the NFC, and they are set to host a game at the Link during Wild Card Weekend in 2 weeks. With the Giants coming to town this weekend on Sunday, the main question surrounding the Birds is, are the starters going to play? Jalen Hurts missed the majority of the last 2 games with a concussion and might be rusty. Saquon Barkley is within reach of breaking the single-season rushing record, so although there might not be any ground to make up as far as standings go, there may be some individual reasons why the starters might play. Nick Sirianni spoke to the media yesterday, and he talked about where he stands as far as his decision on the starters playing.
Still not there, and then, obviously I gave the players off today. They'll be back in a couple days, or they'll be back in. By the next time I talk to you, they'll be back in, and so I'll always inform them before I inform anybody else. But, still sorting through things right now at this particular moment.
The Sixers improved their win streak to 4 in a row last night with a 125-103 win over the Portland Trailblazers. Embiid led the team in scoring with 37 points. And the Flyers ring in the new year tonight. They're playing the San Jose Sharks. Puck drops at 8 p.m. tonight. This update was also brought to you by Mercedes-Benz. Celebrate journeys that bring people closer with an offer on a vehicle to love with Mercedes-Benz Holiday Love Celebration now through January 2nd. More at mbusa.com/special offers. I'm Brendan Gunn on the home of the 76ers and the Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to yours.
Hi, I'm Dylan McKinnon, Digital Content Coordinator.
resolutions in the break as it is New Year's Eve. Hopefully everybody has some fun plans to celebrate tonight. By the way, everybody goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Be safe tonight as you're getting around and celebrating. Find a ride. Order a ride on a rideshare app. Don't start your New Year's in a stupid way, okay? But we were talking New Year's resolutions. By the way, I'm Connor Thomas, sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. Andrew DeCecco to my left, Brendan Gunn on the board. And normally for New Year's Eve, I have a buddy who owns a house like right across the street from my apartment building. And he'll have a bunch of our friends over, and he does this thing where he puts like a whiteboard out with a bunch of markers. And you can write down like what your New Year's resolution is going to be. Now, for a bunch of guys in their like late 20s, early 30s, they're all stupid, but
I can only imagine what these resolutions are.
He sent me a picture of the board last night as it's like the 1 year, like it's been a year, see if everyone accomplished their dumb resolutions. And mine last year was make the Eagles not suck. So whether I had an impact on that, probably not, but I'm going to go ahead and say mission accomplished. It's nice to see that this year that the Eagles, because you remember where we were last year? What a difference a calendar year makes for where this team's at. Last year, they were heading into the postseason, and you just knew they had no shot at doing anything because the team was collapsing. There were questions about the head coach. Both coordinators needed to go. And there were questions about the quarterback, the offense, the organization, Howie, everybody had questions about him. And now we're talking about them having no questions or minimal questions, or at least the least amount of questions of any team in the NFC playoff picture. So it is a much better spot we sit in on this New Year's Eve than the previous one, Andrew.
And it took a while for them to get here. It's very interesting in how the Eagles got to this point. They reassembled the roster. They signed some interesting free agents led by running back Saquon Barkley and linebacker Zach Bond. And Nick Sirianni very much grew and evolved as a coach, learning from last season's shortcomings. And I just think collectively as a team, they got the taste out of their mouth. The chemistry is a lot better. I can tell you that from being down there every week, multiple times a week, that there is a close-knit nature to this locker room that is very reminiscent of the 2022 Eagles. The Eagles are really building something special there, and I think you're starting to see it as they're trending towards the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you could miss it. I don't know how there's any way you could look at this team and not be confident in the position in which they sit. And everybody has done their job this year. Every player, basically, or let's just say every position group at least. If you have a position group, for example, let's look at the pass rush, because that's something we brought up in the first segment. You could say Bryce Huff has been disappointing this year. He hasn't done remotely anything close to the contract that he was given this offseason, and that could, that's obviously a knock on his year, but Nolan Smith has stepped up in a really big way. Brandon Graham, before he went down with the triceps injury that ended his season. Josh Sweat. You got contributions from guys. The different facets of both sides of the ball have been really, really good this year in totality, even where individual players might have had down years. And outside of Bryce Huff, I'm trying to think about who else has had a
regression type of season.
Yeah, nobody on the offense.
No one.
No one really outside on the defense. Jake Elliott, Braden Mann. I don't know. And if we're talking kicker punter, you're probably in a pretty damn good spot. So the Philadelphia Eagles, and that was the big topic we started the show with. You can chime in at 610-632-0975. You can call. You can text. We also have the YouTube chat up running if you want to check us out on YouTube. Haley back there running things with that. But if Sunday was the last time you saw the Philadelphia Eagles starters in the regular season, have you seen everything you needed to see? Do you have any more questions? And building on that, the second part of that is we're going to run through the other NFC playoff teams and see if we could find bigger questions for those squads compared to the Philadelphia Eagles. And we're not trying to just do this to prop up the Philadelphia Eagles because obviously we want this team to win. I'm entirely biased. You know this. If you listen to this and you have some idea that I'm supposed to be impartial and judge the Eagles, I don't know.
They got to look to me for that because I'm the journalist.
Exactly. I'm no journalist. I'm no national reporter. I'm no local reporter. I'm a guy with a microphone who grew up rooting for this team and always wants them to win, and I want to be in New Orleans for the Super Bowl alongside my favorite football team. But I think we're being rational and fair in this conversation when we say that the Eagles are in a darn good spot compared to their peers, even when you restrict that to just other playoff teams. Now, that's in this moment. That is December 31st, 2024. It'll be a brand new year tomorrow. And while that's only a day's worth of difference, as the years go by in the NFL, there are some teams that could really quickly get from bottom part of the standings to, hey, maybe like a postseason team in the NFC, potentially like a 6 seed. Just for example, not that I'm pointing to any specific Washington Commanders team, but they've had a quick turnaround based on Jaden Daniels and Dan Quinn doing a great job and what they did in the offseason, bringing in a bunch of veterans. So turnarounds in the NFL normally take a year or two, but sometimes they can happen quickly. And this is just the thought I had last night. This is a great middle-of-the-week topic for a game upcoming against the New York Giants that matters absolutely nothing to the Philadelphia Eagles. In fact, it would be more beneficial to the Philadelphia Eagles to lose this game long-term because that would then further worsen the New York Giants draft position, who are a team in division that seem far away right now, but you probably would have said the same about the Washington Commanders a year or two ago, and now you're looking at a situation where they are competing with you for that top spot in the NFC East. The Eagles already wrapping it up, but it went to Week 17, man. So one of the exercises we're also going to do, and this is going to be throughout the show, and we're going to pop back into this here and there, and if you'd like to share your opinions on this as well, you can on the phone lines. But I want to look at the future situations of NFL teams. And we're going to start bottom up because that's going to be the more interesting part, I do think, of like what teams down near the bottom of the standing. We know the Eagles are at the top, so I don't want to give away where we have the Eagles positioned and then just spend half the show running through like the Panthers and the Saints and stuff like that, basically the NFC South and stuff like that. But what would you say, Andrew? Because this is something I'm going to lean on you heavy for this.
Sure.
The team in the NFL that is in the worst situation of any team.
New York Giants.
They are, even with the draft capital they could have this year, they're the worst team in the worst position?
I don't have a ton of confidence that they're going to make the right draft selection. I don't know about you, but they need a quarterback. They need a running back. They need offensive line help. Their defense is in shambles. I mean, they are, from pillar to post, they need to revamp their whole structure.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the other teams down near the standings, and Tennessee, you could probably make a bit of an argument because Will Levis is not the guy, and they might be. The weird thing about this, right, is there's so many factors. You could say, well, the Giants are worse than the Titans right now, and at least the Titans have a guy, but having Will Levis currently in the NFL is, okay, we have a guy who we might pay because we have to, because we don't want to draft another quarterback, and the next thing you know, you're roped into a Daniel Jones-like contract, and I don't see them paying Will Levis that much at any point. But almost having the wrong guy is worse than having nobody at all. Mm-hmm. So you look at that. Cleveland is in a weird spot, but they could very well end up with the number 1 overall pick. New England already has Drake May. They've got their guy. Like, I think I got to go with you that the New York Giants are in the worst spot in the NFL. We're also going to bring Brendan Gunn in, who's producing the show and this conversation, I guess, by proxy, into this conversation. You have any issues with the Giants being put in the 32nd spot for future positioning?
Not at all. They're a mess, and they're going to bring back Joe Shane. They're going to bring back Brian Daboll, and they're going to have the same results next year. You got to go out there and get a quarterback. And guess what? You could have had the pick of your choice, but you go out there and ruin that this past Sunday as well. I don't know. You get Shedeur Sanders in there. You never know what's going to happen with Deion. You get Cam Ward there. You never know what's going to happen with that. Like, I think they need to improve every position on that football team, and I'm sure as hell glad they're in our division as well.
Yeah, they might need to improve the front office a little bit, too, with Saquon Barkley walking. I don't think you could argue that there's a franchise that's had a worse season from a fan perspective than the New York Giants, right? Because you could say the front office, they believed in what they were doing for maybe like the first month of the season. Malik Neighbors looks like a player. You're not really winning games. You're just like, okay, well, Saquon hasn't had an incredible start to his Eagles tenure. He's good, obviously good through 4 weeks or whatever. And then post-Eagles bye week, their season falls apart. Saquon goes off. They have no chance in the division. They're getting smoked by everybody. They're messing up their draft position this late in the season. They're a dumpster fire. So I'm good with that. The 31st team, the next worst team after the Giants, I think Tennessee's probably there, right? Cleveland?
New England?
You think New England's got Drake May? I don't
know about Gerard Mayo. I don't know what their.
I'd rather have a quarterback than a head coach. I'll tell you what. I think it's easier to find a head coach.
Are you sold? It depends on how sold you are on Drake May. How confident are you that he can be their guy moving forward?
Enough. I think he's better than Will Levis.
I agree there.
And I think they're in a better – Tennessee's not exactly – they don't have Belichick or anything.
And the Patriots are sitting at the 1 pick right now, so they can either keep it with Drake May and get a ton of assets back for that and move down in the draft, or if they're not comfortable with Drake May, they can get another quarterback, I suppose.
Yeah, you could also argue, like, sneaky bad, the Las Vegas Raiders.
That's what I was thinking, too. That was my other one.
Because they're 4-12 right now, so they're not in play for the number 1 overall pick. One of those 3-13 teams down at the bottom is going to lose in Week 18.
Yeah, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, like they don't have a solution at quarterback.
Let's go. Are you cool with going the Raiders at 31, and then we'll put the Titans at 30?
Yeah, let's do that.
Any issues with that, B-Gun?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so we have 3 teams down. The bottom is going to be the harder part because as the ranks thin out for teams to pick.
We're splitting hairs, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But like, just this gives you an idea, right, folks, of where some teams in the NFL are. And one of the teams, the worst team in any position looking at futures going forward, the New York Giants, is in your division. This should make you feel good, not just about every team that goes off the board as we do this exercise compared to the Philadelphia Eagles. It just gives you more faith that this is super sustainable, what the Philadelphia Eagles have done this year. It's also a reminder that this isn't the easiest thing. It's not simple, like just go out there and draft well, and the next thing you know, you're going to be one of the top 4 teams in football by postseason seeding. Like, no, there was some work put in by Howie Roseman this offseason to make this happen and work by individual players to put them in this spot. So 3 teams down. We'll continue to do that throughout the program and work through that list. It's going to be a long process, but a fun one, considering where the Eagles will probably end up. Coming up next, we're going to go to the text line, calls and everything, get some of your reaction on our topics. But I want to talk about not only Tyrese Maxey winning Eastern Conference Player of the Week, but the Sixers. They're on a little bit of a roll right now, and we have something to revisit from Kincade and Salciunas shows of the past that Andrew Salciunas and I might have been on the right side of. We'll talk about it coming up next. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. This is Kincade and Salciunas right here at 97.5 The Fanatic.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to you.
had a fun start to the show here on this New Year's Eve. Hopefully you have some fun plans and some good resolutions to help improve your life set for this evening's festivities. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. He will be back on Thursday. Andrew DeCecco to my left sitting in for John Kincade. He will also be back on Thursday. Johnny's been out since before Christmas, so it would be good to have the band back together. All of us off tomorrow to celebrate the New Year's Day holiday. But something else that we should be celebrating right now, and we've been talking about the Eagles heavily. We're going to continue to be Eagles-centric as they push towards the postseason. Every day is a day closer to figuring out who you're going to match up with, and then it's going to be breaking down that opponent, and hopefully we'll be doing this for another month still as they work their way towards New Orleans in Super Bowl 58, right? 58?
Yeah.
At least track out.
59.
Is it 59? Okay.
59, yeah, because
Okay.
we were in 57.
Yeah, I can't keep track of all the Super Bowls. It's like there's a new one every year.
Super Bowl licks.
They keep
LIX.
coming out with these things. But as they progress towards Super Bowl 59, thank you, not a numbers guy, we'll continue to talk about the Birds. But the Sixers have made a little bit of noise, and I don't want to let this show go by without talking about another win by them last night. Joel Embiid goes for 37-9. They take down the Portland Trailblazers. The Sixers, if you haven't been paying attention, have won 4 straight games, and they've won 6 of their last 7. They are starting to look more like a team that we thought they could be, and we had a previous conversation, Andrew, on this show with John and Andrew Salciunas and myself. And it was a question, man, I forget how long ago. It must have been a month at this point, where we were talking about the Sixers win total on, I guess, January 4th, because that would be about the time when the regular season was wrapping up for the Eagles. And will the Sixers have more wins than the Eagles? My initial gut reaction was, yeah, of course they will. They're going to play significantly more games, and I still think they're a good team. And then I was like, oh, I might have jumped the gun on that one. I might roll that back. Well, the Sixers currently have 13 wins.
They have equaled.
And the Eagles are not playing for a win this Sunday, and the Sixers still have 3 games between that. So even though it's this weird arbitrary argument that only exists inside the walls of this studio pretty much, the Sixers, that'll show you they've been playing darn good basketball lately. And by the way, Tyrese Maxey winning Eastern Conference Player of the Week for last week's worth of games after a great Christmas performance against Boston and a couple other wins in there. It's just a good spot for this team to be in.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And when you look at it, Joel Embiid, 37 points, 9 rebounds. Tyrese Maxey, 23 points. I think the most interesting element to that game to me was Kelly Oubre, 15 points, 6 of 10 from the field. He had 8 steals. He was the first Sixer to have 8+ steals since Robert Covington back in 2015, believe it or not. And they started out pretty sloppy, but Tyrese Maxey had about 11 points. He had 11 points in the first, and then Joel Embiid really took over in the second. So it's exciting basketball when all their stars are playing, and we're not even talking about Paul George, who got into foul trouble again.
Right.
And he's the one that we're talking the least about.
Exactly, because he's kind of, the bar's so low for him with him having to make up for Tobias Harris. Like, he basically just has to be better than what Tobias was. And he's had some with the big 3 available. It's small sample size. He hasn't really had the impact people expected him to have with this team, or people expected he could have, I would say. But if he starts scoring 15, 20, 25 a game, we know he's capable of that, playing strong defense, being a veteran guy that makes the right decisions with the ball. How much more dangerous does this team get? I'm not ready to start looking at postseason or anything yet, but the whole idea that this is a lost season, punt on the year, tank for Cooper flag, all the crazy stuff that we were hearing from people, it doesn't seem to be where this team sits right now, and that's a good thing, because eventually, even with the Super Bowl, right, even if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, at some point the NFL season is going to come to an end, and we know the Flyers are still in kind of this rebuild mode, so it will turn to Sixers to hold us over from that time until when the Phillies get going again, and that part of the Philly sports calendar is looking a little bit more bright today as we see the Sixers with a nice 4-game win streak. And, mind you, in the middle of the Disney on Ice imposed West Coast road trip that always happens around Christmas. So, a little bit of love to the Sixers, who deserve it right now. But I want to check in on what we have on the text line on our main topics today on the show. Brendan Gunn, what are the people saying?
Yeah, let me get one up for you guys. We got Reese in Nebraska checking in. He says, in franchise history, whenever the Birds smoke the Cowboys at home or on the road, it usually means they are going to the Super Bowl. Just hope we are bringing it home this year at the Link.
So, is that factual that, like, when they have these big wins, it feels right because I'm thinking about the Eagles, like, sneaking in and they needed the Cowboys, or they needed some help, and then they needed to beat the Cowboys, the 44-6 game. That was one where they went on a run. Like, they smoked the Cowboys at home in 2017, I believe. So
no, that last game of the season, I think there was. No, am I
They
thinking?
smoked them in Dallas.
Yeah, and then it was
okay,
6-0. Remember, it was 6-0. That was a very weird.
Yeah, because that was the
Nick Foles played in that game, and I think he threw I don't know. It was a bad game.
that was one of those weird, like, oh, is Nate Sudfeld going to be the guy, which we now know is dumb. But, okay, I love that, and I also always love beating Dallas. I put more stock into beating the Cowboys than I think most people. There's been this narrative of, like, well, we're a great team, so we're more focused on the overall goal of the season, which is win a Super Bowl and all of that stuff. So beating a lowly Cowboys team doesn't really matter as much to us. That always matters to me. I hate that team. I love to see them get smoked. To have a total of 8 turnovers in 2 games forced against that team, to beat them by a combined score of, what was it? So 75 to, like, 10? 13. That's just, like, it's a preposterous year against your biggest rival in division to see that happen. Love that. So good call from Reese there.
And did you hear Micah Parsons after the game?
Yes.
What was he even talking about? He's like, outside of 5 plays in the scoreboard, I think we had him. It's like, aside for the play, I mean, like, what are we doing here?
It's just, I don't understand. And listen, it's Micah Parsons. He always has weird stuff to say. He's always going to find a way to try and spin it that it's not as bad as it is. He's got his podcast. He's going to talk about it. That's the modern athlete.
It's like, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? When he's talking about all the big plays that the Eagles had on him, he goes, it wasn't that bad.
I think it's more than 5 plays that made a determination in a 41-7 game.
Yeah,
like,
besides the objective of the game being 41-7, it wasn't that bad.
No, that's just coping, and that's something that the Cowboys have to do because their season and their organization feels like it's in complete shambles right now. Shout out to Jerry Jones, who I may think we will talk about in today's headlines at 8:05 with Brendan Gunn. We'll see if that is indeed something that is brought up, Jerry. But no, the Cowboys getting smoked is always a great feeling for Philadelphia Eagles fans. And even though it wasn't like it was more of a formality this year, especially once Dak Prescott went down, I always love seeing that Dallas Cowboys team lose. So, some Dallas Cowboys hate. If you want to fill that in on the text line, you can do that as well. Coming up next, we're going to reset the big topics of the show. And I also have a what-if scenario for Nick Sirianni. If you are one of the folks that say, play the starters, or if they want to go out there and play, you should let them. Yes, we all do fertilize. He's been darn good this year, too. We might have to get into that later on. But
he has been great.
If the players come to Nick Sirianni and ask to play, how do you react? And it's not just asking, are they telling? We will discuss that scenario, and this is hypothetical, but we'll talk about it coming up. And I'm very interested because you know the locker room, Andrew, if you believe this to be a possibility heading into Week 18. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Salciunas. This is Kincade Salciunas, and we're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
What to do with the starters. I'm Brendan Gunn, and this update is driven by Gary Barbera. Is Gary Barbera the best? Boy, I guess. New year, new car. See Gary Barbera's Dallas Sucks bus. Coach Nick picks Barbera, so drive like Brandon Graham and Coach Nick. Is Barbera the best? Boy, I guess. DallasStillSucks.com. After Week 17 around the NFL, the Eagles are now locked into the 2 seed in the NFC, and they're set to host a home game at the Link during Wild Card Weekend in 2 weekends from now. With the New York Giants coming to town, the main question surrounding the Birds is, are the starters going to play? Jalen Hurts has missed some time, so he might be rusty. Saquon Barkley is within reach of the single-season rushing record. So although there might not be any ground to make up in the standings, there may be some individual reasons why the starters might play. Nick Sirianni spoke to the media yesterday, and this is where he talked about where he stands in that decision.
Still not there, and then, obviously I gave the players off today. They'll be back in a couple days, or they'll be back in. By the next time I talk to you, they'll be back in, and so I'll always inform them before I inform anybody else. But, still sorting through things right now at this particular moment.
The Sixers improved their win streak to 4 in a row last night with a 125-103 win over the Portland Trail Blazers. Joel Embiid led the teams in scoring with 37 points. And the Flyers will be ringing in the new year on the ice tonight. They play the San Jose Sharks. Puck drops at 8 p.m. You can catch that game right here on The Fanatic at 8 o'clock. I'm Brendan Gunn on the home of the 76ers and the Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to you.
already on this New Year's Eve show here. Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. I got Andrew DeCecco to my left, Brendan Gunn on the board, and we got some fun stuff that we're running through. Kind of an overall type of show. It's not so pointed on one topic. Yesterday, we ran through a lot of the Saquon Barkley conversation about whether or not he should play on Sunday, whether or not they should chase the record, what the upsides and downsides of that are going to be. Now, when we basically put together the verbal pros and cons list yesterday, it was strongly pointing towards him not playing on Sunday. So now that we've at least reached that point, again, I'd like to keep the conversation open. If you're someone who still firmly believes that we are crazy and Saquon Barkley has history in front of him and they should allow him to go do that, feel free to join into the show today and continue to make that opinion. But we've made ours known, so there's no use in beating the dead horse of why the dangers of playing Saquon Barkley and by proxy, the rest of the NFL, the rest of the Eagles' offensive starters. See, I've got the NFL on my mind because we're doing some NFL topics today. It doesn't seem to make sense to risk injury for your big-time players when you don't need the game. So with that in mind, we've turned the conversation to a couple of bigger overarching topics. The first one being, have you seen enough from the Philadelphia Eagles starters? This is very possibly a time where we have already seen them finish the regular season out. Like, it's more likely than not, I would say, that they don't play Sunday. And you've seen the last regular season game from the starters. Have you seen enough? And when you have your questions about the Eagles, do every other NFC playoff team's questions outweigh those of the Philadelphia Eagles? So we're going to knock back a couple more playoff teams in this segment. We've also had a conversation about putting together the rankings of NFL teams as far as the future is concerned. Like, who is in the worst spot going forward, best spot going forward, and who are the teams that fill in the gaps in between them? We already have on that list the Giants in the division as the worst team positioned for the future. The Las Vegas Raiders, 31st, and the Titans, 30th. So we'll knock back a couple more of those. But I'm very interested in your opinion on this one, Andrew.
Sure.
This is a hypothetical situation that I don't think is crazy to consider could happen. Earlier this year, the offensive line, or a couple of the offensive linemen, the big names, Mailata and Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson, go into Nick Sirianni's office, and they talk about, we need to run the football, we need to do this offensively, we need to get Saquon going. This is what needs to change with the offense for us to work this out. That was the bye week. All they did following that is go on a 10-game win streak and cement themselves as one of the best teams in the NFL. So the precedent has been set for the Philadelphia Eagles offensive leaders going to talk to the head coach about what they want to see happen. Now, it's still on Nick Sirianni to listen to them, and he gets credit for doing that earlier in the season. But let's say this happens. Let's say Nick Sirianni gets into his office today, and he's got an appointment and Outlook calendar invite pops up from offensive linemen. And they walk in the room and they say, we want to play Sunday. We want to be on that field. We want Saquon to get that record. Let us go after it. This is not, hey, we'd prefer. This is, we want to play on Sunday. And if you're Nick Sirianni, you're probably already thinking, it's not in my best interest to do that. How hard is it for him to handle that conversation, considering he's a player's first coach? He's a guy that guys love to play for, and he wants to try and listen to his leaders and give them what they want. Like, how easy would it be for him to say no, or how difficult would it be for him to say no to that? I think it would be, for a guy like Nick Sirianni, the personality he has, I think that'd be an extremely difficult conversation to tell his players something they definitively want to do to help the team positively, at least from the esteem of like getting the all-time rushing record, to tell them, no, I can't let you do what you want to do. Is it going to be a difficult decision if that's a conversation that happens?
I don't think so. And to be clear, I do think it would take all of the offensive linemen for Nick Sirianni to really even consider it, because based on what I was able to glean post-game, it didn't seem to me that Lane Johnson was all that, I'm okay with sitting down. He goes, at 34 years old, he goes, a bye week is huge. But, I'll play along with this. So I think that it would be something that he would just say, guys, you got to trust me on this. That we have a larger goal in mind, and in order for us to make sure that we meet those goals, or at least are on that course, you got to trust me. It's much bigger than this. Saquon's had 2,000 rushing yards. He's one of 9 players in the NFL who has accomplished that. Our goal is to reach a Super Bowl, and we got to make sure that we preserve you guys. Cam's played over 1,000 snaps this year. Mekhi Becton and Landon Dickerson have both been banged up at times throughout the season. Jordan Mailata has been on injured reserve, and Lane Johnson always is fighting through something. Just trust me on that. Take the week off, rest up, and let's take it to the Green Bay Packers. I think that will be the message. Will he receive some pushback? Probably, but I think they're ultimately going to understand where he's coming from once they take a few minutes to process it. and they know that they have much more bigger things at hand.
See, when we have a conversation like this, where to me personally, when I think about resting or playing the starters on Sunday, it is so blatantly obvious that playing the starters would be the dumb thing. Like, there is clearly, and this is rare in sports talk radio because everything is debatable, but there is clearly a right and a wrong answer to me in this conversation. So one of the tests I like to run on people who find themselves in the other camp is to push this to like the furthest possible edge of the conversation and see if it still holds water, their side of the argument. So I don't think that we've got like a Rudy type situation where every offensive starter goes in, lays their jersey down on Nick Sirianni's desk and says, I need Saquon to get the record. Like
they didn't even do that in Rudy. That was just completely manufactured for the movie.
Yeah, right. It's just Hollywood stuff. I don't think that type of situation is going to happen. But even if it did, you're hearing Andrew DeCecco, who is in the locker room, who talks to these players, who understands what the feel of the team is, the vibe, to use that word, has become so overused even by me. But how these players feel and how the coach-player dynamic is, and even if the players came in and demanded it, you're still telling me Nick Sirianni would probably say no.
Yeah, because it's not an easy decision, to be clear. That's why we're having this conversation. But when you preach all season, we're playing for something bigger, we know what the mission is, well, then you have to stay the course. Saquon accomplished something that, like I said, he's one of 9 players who have done that. That's an incredible feat in and of itself. I think it would be short-sighted to go after the rushing title when you have a number of players who have been nicked up at various points. The offensive line is the key to the offensive success in the postseason. So I think that you need to make sure that they're as rested as possible. They also haven't had a bye week since week 5. That's 12 weeks. I think it would be best practice, and putting my coaching hat on, I have to think that that's the way that they're going to lean, bypass the record in search of something that will also be forever in a Super Bowl championship.
Yeah, the whole thing that I come back to when I think about the coach and player dynamic is I think about parent-child, and that's not fair to the players. Like, it's not that big of a gap between the ability to have the conversation, but it's the most universal example that I could think of that talks about what Nick Sirianni's responsibilities are. So, if your kid wants ice cream for breakfast, you're going to have to tell them no, even if they're adamant that they want ice cream for breakfast.
It's going to be waffles today.
Exactly. You have your waffles. That's still a pretty good deal. I'd take that deal. But we know that the fallout from telling somebody no when they're adamant about something could be an adverse reaction, which for a child could be throwing a fit. And I don't think any Eagles players are throwing a fit. But just to put people at ease, if this does happen and they are adamant they want to play and Nick Sirianni says no, he says, guys, listen, man, it's my job as the head coach to make decisions in the best interest of the team going forward. We're playing for something bigger. I got to sit you guys down this week. Get ready for the Packers. Take that frustration out on them. Do you expect any type of ill will, fallout, issue with the head coach, locker room problems? Like, is there anything negative from a locker room perspective that could come from Nick Sirianni saying, yeah, guys, I know you want to play, but I'm not letting you?
Not at all. Not on this team. I think Nick Sirianni has built up enough equity, Connor, that there wouldn't be any sort of pushback or, harbored resentment for that decision. I just believe that this team, they're wired to really go with whatever Nick Sirianni opts to do. Nick Sirianni is receptive to feedback, but he's the head coach at the end of the day, and whatever he says goes, and everyone's well aware of that. And they'll move forward from it. I mean, it's something that they would all like to accomplish as an offense, but it also takes every single player on that offense to agree to do it. A.J. Brown also seemed after the game. He expressed, if you read between the lines, that he would have been totally fine with resting. Remember, he popped up on the injury report last week with a knee injury. The week of rest is much more critical to the team's success than an individual record in Saquon Barkley's rushing title.
I completely agree. Hopefully that little hypothetical exercise that we went through there puts you a little more at ease, not just to what the right decision is, but that the right decision will not have any issues caused the rest of the way for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, this seems so simple to me. I'm floored that there is such reaction among the fan base that Saquon should play, right? It's insane to me that there are so many people that seem to have that opinion. The word that we kept using yesterday, short-sighted, was a word you were using to describe it. It's just, I don't see how there's people on the other side of this argument, but I'm not the type of person to say, well, I don't understand why you're there, so we're not going to allow you to make that point of view. Feel free to chime in if you still stand in that camp. We'll just go further and further throughout the week to show you why that is not the smartest move for the Philadelphia Eagles. But again, seems pretty open and shut to me. You can chime in on that conversation, 610-632-0975. Should Nick Sirianni listen to his players over his own instincts when it comes to who's available on Sunday to play? Should it be hey, if they want to get out there, you got to let your horses run? Or are you sticking with or moving over to the side of, they should not play, avoid the injury, rest up for the postseason? We've got two continuing topics that I want to get back to. We've been asking the big questions about the Eagles heading into the postseason, which there are very few, and none of them really all that large. And then comparing that to the other teams in the NFC playoff picture. So we've done the Lions. Obviously, their biggest question is the injuries and their defensive side of the ball. Are they able to withstand the war of attrition that has been their NFL season? For the Vikings, it is the guy, the signal caller on offense, Sam Darnold, no postseason experience, and he's had an outstanding year. But is he a guy that you can trust in the playoffs? Nobody has the answer to that question. That is a bigger question than anything facing the Eagles. This is an interesting one because when I look at the Los Angeles Rams, I'm going to need your help. I don't have a clear major question about that team off the top of my head. I know that they haven't had the greatest season, but I see a quarterback that has won a Super Bowl before, a head coach that has won a Super Bowl before, offensive pass catchers that are darn good, a defensive front led by rookie Jared Verse that has been effective enough this year. But what is the biggest question facing the Los Angeles Rams?
The secondary. Their second and third level defense are very vulnerable to the pass. That's where I think they're going to run into issues in the postseason. You already know I'm bullish on Matthew Stafford, and I like the Rams to a degree as a team, but I think you're going to lean towards Matthew Stafford's veteran prowess, and he's already won a Super Bowl, as you said. They have a very prolific tandem of wide receivers in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So they're a team that is very interesting when you start to really look at the landscape of the postseason. I think that they could possibly be the Eagles' second opponent should they advance, and they're a team that I'm putting sort of in the middle of that playoff field. They don't have a ton of glaring weaknesses, but it would be the secondary.
And they're a team as well. When you look at them, they're 5-3 at home, 5-3 away on the season. So their splits are fine, but conference-wise, they are 6-5 against NFC opponents. So they've had some slip-ups against teams that they're going to see. The Eagles, one of them, down the road. I'm not worried about the Los Angeles Rams. I just didn't really have a clear, there was no glaring immediacy of this is why they can't win,
right,
because they are a team that has at least a quarterback and a coach that did win recently. Now, Matt Stafford is another couple years older, and Sean McVay doesn't exactly carry the same weight as a head coach as he did when he first burst on the scene as this kind of wunderkind type of, you're going to hire any coach that's ever sniffed his jockstrap. This is a situation where still, though, they could be a dangerous team based on having proven they could win at this level. That is a bigger question. The Rams secondary than anything facing the Eagles. The Eagles defense doesn't have a bona fide weakness. They have spots where you brought up the pass rush earlier. We'd like to see them perform better, but they're not in a situation where you say, the pass rush is going to be the Eagles' Achilles heel because you have a secondary to make up for it. You have linebackers that get after the quarterback. You have everything you kind of need on the defensive side of the ball. 610-632-0975 is the phone number to jump into the conversation. If you have any questions about our questions that we're asking about the NFC postseason picture and those teams, if there's anything you disagree with as we run through these teams, feel free to jump in. But also we know people still want to talk about that Saquon Barkley decision for this coming Sunday, should he go after the record. Let's go to Stu in Philly who wants to talk about just that. Stu, you're live here on The Fanatic.
Hey, guys. Good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
It seems kind of apparent to me that they're not going to do it, because if they were, wouldn't they have left him in the fourth quarter? The last game against the Cowboys, he could have got another. Cowboys were laying down at that point. He probably could have got 50 yards that game.
Kind of. The logic's a little flawed there, Stu, just because 31 carries would have tied his third highest mark in his career. So he was kind of at the point where his usage in that game was already pretty high. But I understand.
It was a blowout, too.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, though, about they could have gotten him 30, 40 more yards in that game, leaving him in. And then it would have cut down on how much he had to get. That does seem to indicate that the record is not first and foremost in their mind.
Yeah, because he was already warmed up. He was already ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
2 more carries. The Cowboys were pretty much packing their bags at that point, you know.
Yeah, so you don't think he plays on Sunday then?
Nah, he's not going to play. He's definitely not going to play.
All right, Stu. Well, appreciate the call, man.
Thanks,
you enjoy
Stu.
your New Year's Eve and your New Year's. Yeah, I mean, is that a rational thing? See, I had that thought yesterday, and I think that's like I have these dumb sports brain thoughts where there's no logic to it, but I still have the thought process from just like years of watching sports and weird trends and things that happen. Is it normal to say like I'm less nervous about Saquon? If they had kept him in that game against the Cowboys, I would have been less nervous than him starting a whole new game against the Giants. It doesn't make sense, right? Because
I kind of see what you're saying, Connor.
but why though? I don't have logic to back that up.
He was already in the flow of the game. He was warmed up already. You knew exactly. You saw the looks that the Dallas defense was giving, so you probably felt pretty. I'm just trying to get inside your head here.
Right.
You're probably more comfortable with the looks that they were getting to suggest that he could make a serious dent at the rushing total there. And then you're going against the Giants team that they don't have anything to play for. It's his former team. You're probably worried about them taking unnecessary cheap shots, perhaps. And that kind of plays into it, and maybe even not Saquon. Maybe they're trying to chop block an offensive lineman, and maybe they're headhunting. So those are all things that I think should be taken into the equation.
Now, be careful. Getting inside my head is a scary place to be. I don't think
I was
you want
scared.
to be
I had to, yeah.
I'm glad you made it out alive. But no, that's kind of exactly where, if I had to break down the logic behind why I feel that way, it's just so weird to say, like, any given NFL play, I'd imagine there's equal risk of injury. If a running back is touching a ball, whether it's fourth quarter, first quarter, whether it's new game, old game that they're in, flow of the game, whatever, I'd say it's equal percentage chance that you're going to have an injury. It's just you never know. Obviously, there are more depending on the type of play it is. I'm not saying that, but you touch the ball, you run a play, you have a chance of being hurt in an NFL game, whether it's a new game or an old one. But that point that our caller Stu just brought up where like they would have left him in the game because he was already warmed up against Dallas, I thought about that too, and I didn't really have good reasoning. This is why it's great to have you here, because you can kind of pick apart why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling without me getting there myself. This is why we did a defensive
Dr. DeCecco.
Exactly. We did a defensive therapy session after the loss to the Washington Commanders. The better therapy session, I think, all due respect to your fake doctor degree, was what the Eagles did Sunday against the Cowboys, enforcing 4 turnovers and holding them to 7 points. As we look further down in the playoff picture in the NFC, I want to knock back another question here real quick. 4 teams. This is going to be an easy one because as we look at the playoff standings, we have to go with another divisional winner, and currently it is, well, it's Tampa Bay. That actually might not be an easy one. Tampa Bay's biggest question going into, they have a bigger question than the Philadelphia Eagles.
Offensive line, I would say, Connor. I don't know how you feel about Baker Mayfield.
I like Baker Mayfield.
You
I
like
do.
Baker Mayfield. I don't think he's terrible, which Bill Colarulo constantly professes. That's just not true. He's not terrible, but he's not among the upper echelon quarterbacks. He does just enough to pilot that offense and navigate it, and I think that defense is pretty tough. I think that they do have some holes, particularly in the secondary, but Todd Bowles is not a coach that the Eagles want to see, knowing how he's able to kind of diagnose what the Eagles want to do offensively.
We're going to continue that conversation coming up because I know there's some people scared of the Buccaneers out there. We need to find a better question to ask about that team. An offensive line could be a fair one, but I also want to dive into like the injuries they faced in the middle of the season and what the toll that can take on a team and see where that puts them. But Tampa's an interesting one. And we're also going to talk about coming up, this is a time where we have the opportunity to turn the lens away from the Eagles a little bit. And when I say that, I'm saying we're still talking in general about the Eagles, but when you take care of your business, then you get to look at the other teams and compare yourself to them. The opportunity to compare only comes because you have taken care of what you need to. And we could be looking at a pretty tough postseason draw in the wild card round. So, the Green Bay Packers will be discussed coming up next, and the question of how much should we worry about them will be asked, just preliminarily, because we will have plenty of time if they are indeed the opponent to talk about them. But I want to get our initial thoughts on what that matchup could look like coming up next. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. Andrew DeCecco to my left, Brennan Gunn on the board. We're back after this from Kincade and Salciunas here, 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
To play or not to play? I'm Brendan Gunn, and this update is brought to you by Gary Barbera. Is Gary Barbera the best? Boy, I guess. New year, new car. See Gary Barbera's Dallas Sucks bus. Coach Nick picks Barbera, so drive like Brandon Graham and Coach Nick. Is Barbera the best? Boy, I guess. DallasStillSucks.com. After Week 17 around the NFL, the Eagles are still locked in to the 2 seed in the NFC, so they are set to host a game at the Link during Wild Card Weekend in 2 weekends from now. With the New York Giants coming to town this weekend, though, the main question surrounding the Birds is, are the starters going to play? Jalen Hurts has missed the majority of the last 2 games with a concussion, so he might be rusty. Saquon Barkley has the single-season rushing record in his eyes, so although there might not be any ground to make up in the standings, there may be some individual reasons why the starters may play. Nick Sirianni spoke to the media yesterday and talked about where he stands as far as his decision as that goes.
Still not there, and then, obviously I gave the players off today. They'll be back in a couple days, or they'll be back in. By the next time I talk to you, they'll be back in, and so I'll always inform them before I inform anybody else. But, still sorting through things right now at this particular moment.
The Sixers improved their win streak to 4 in a row last night with a 125-103 win over the Portland Trail Blazers. Joel Embiid led the team in scoring with 37 points. And the Flyers, they're ringing in the new year on the ice. They play the San Jose Sharks tonight. Puck drops at 8 p.m., so you might as well ring in your new year listening to us on The Fanatic and The Flyers. I'm Brendan Gunn on the home of the 76ers and the Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to yours.
Hey there, it's Silvana Kelleher.
want to go back to this because I'm not totally comfortable with the way that we ended last segment. Not anything on us, but one of the things that we're getting into today is looking at questions facing other NFC playoff teams. Because our big topic today is, have you seen everything you've needed to see from the Philadelphia Eagles? You could have seen the starters for the last time this past Sunday against Dallas. And if that was the finale for the regular season, what a damn finale it was. That was like the finale of a fireworks show where they shoot them all off at once. Everybody had a monster day, even with the second string and the third string quarterback in. Even with a bit of a slow start by the Eagles defense, might I say. Now, the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson pick six completely disproves that narrative. But Dallas was moving the ball pretty well the first couple drives. And then it was just, okay, we're going to put the clamps down on you because we're better, and that's what we do. You saw an incredible last performance, if that was indeed the last performance in the regular season by the Philadelphia Eagles starters. So, have you seen everything you need to see? And on top of that, if you have any questions, well, are there bigger questions for other teams? You have to have the outside perspective because right now is the perfect time to turn your attention not totally away from the Eagles, but towards other teams and comparing them. We don't have to focus on a game this weekend. You don't have to win. You're locked into the 2 seed. You're going to be in that spot. So, frankly, and I've said it earlier, but I'll say it again, it would be better for the Eagles to lose this game against the Giants so that you hurt their draft positioning. Not that they're going in trying to intentionally lose this game.
No, that's not one thought in their mind.
No, but it's a thought in mine. It's a thought of the fan base, not the players in the locker room or the coaching staff. But we talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the questions potentially facing them. And I don't think we had a great answer there to what their biggest question is. They had injuries in the middle of the season. Still no Chris Godwin, which is a big issue for them because he is a really beneficial part of their passing offense. And yet, they're one of the best passing teams in the NFL, one of the best rushing teams in the NFL. They're really good against the run defensively. They're 29th in the NFL in passing yards per game allowed. But there's some names in the secondary down there that you would say, well, they've got some good defensive backs. So what's up with their passing defense?
Yeah, Zion McCollum, twin brother of Eagles safety Tristan McCollum, has been playing like one of the NFL's best corners this year. But aside from that, Antoine Winfield, the safety, he's back there, of course, from Minnesota. He went to the University of Minnesota. He was a high draft pick. But Jamel Dean is pretty – he doesn't have the long speed that you would like. He can be had, for lack of a better term. I just think they've had players in and out of the lineup this year that they haven't had the continuity that you would expect. Now, I will say that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could be a pretty challenging opponent should it ever work out in the way where they have to face the Eagles because they do. I'm not sure if they're getting Godwin back, but Jalen McMillan, the rookie wide receiver from Washington, has done a nice job. Mike Evans is a Hall of Fame wide receiver, and he has a really good chemistry with Baker Mayfield, and that defense finds ways to put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks.
And Bucky Irving has had a really good year for them, stepping into a role in the backfield. I mean, they're a team that you would look at and say, okay, they could be a challenging out. Now, the good thing for the Eagles is there's not like the easiest path to seeing Tampa Bay in the postseason. Like, it's not like they're a guaranteed matchup for you. You don't have them the first time, like in the wild card round. How would the Eagles have to match up? If the Bucs win their first game, would it be Tampa Bay coming to Philly? I'm not great with this whole seed.
No. I was told there would be no math. I don't think so.
Yeah, so
and that's my go-to line whenever I have to kind of configure that.
Right. If Tampa Bay ends up making a deep postseason run and the NFC Championship game is them coming to the link, I'm taking the Eagles in that game 1 billion times out of 1 billion. I don't care about the Todd Bowles like dynamic.
Really?
Yeah,
You're that confident?
Absolutely. They're the better team. They absolutely are. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that the Eagles lost to that team earlier this year. I kind of like this Eagles team with the Nick Sirianni coaching style of like, hey, we're going to correct this. We're going to focus in on the problems that we have. I love them playing teams that they've had trouble with in this season and not trouble of their own fault because they haven't really had trouble of their own fault against anybody. In that Tampa Bay game, you're missing Lane Johnson, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. The offense was anemic because you didn't have your guys. I can write that off. In the loss to the Washington Commanders, you didn't have Jalen Hurts. I can write that off. Like, you see this team and you say, okay, the loss to the Atlanta Falcons, I look at that and I say, you should have won that game with smarter coaching and Saquon Barkley catching the ball. And that was also so early in the season. They were still trying to figure out their offensive identity. I don't see a loss that the Eagles have had where I'm like, well, they were clearly not the better team in that game for reasons of their own, not injuries or anything like that. They just didn't put together a good enough game plan. And that we can go ahead and I can write that off. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. So I think the passing defense by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is their weak spot, and I think that's a bigger question for them in Tampa than anything facing the Eagles. Just the numbers would indicate that.
No, that's fair. No, and I think that aside from that, they are a pretty tough opponent because they're well-rounded. And I think that Mike Evans is a player who's going to be a huge factor of the postseason because you can't really defend him, and the Eagles have had trouble with him. And their defense, their linebackers, Levante David, he's been around forever, and Yaya Diaby, he had a sack fumble against Jalen Hurts. They have some players there on defense. Kalijah Kancey, their former first-round pick there from Pitt. So, yeah, that's not a team that I don't think the Eagles want to see.
I'm not looking forward to that matchup. I'm not saying give me Tampa. I we'll smoke them. That's not really how I want to see this play out. But the other thing with Tampa, too, is they'd have to come on the Tampa, too. Not the formation, but they'd have to come on the road to Philadelphia. And if this Eagles team gets anybody at Lincoln Financial Field, they're going to be favored. They should be, and I'm going to pick them. So, not a great question about the Bucs, and I don't really have a great question about another team in the Green Bay Packers, who is a matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Green Bay Packers are going to be, most likely, your wild card round matchup. So let's look at Green Bay a little bit and the potential matchup that would echo the opening matchup down in Brazil where the Eagles found a way to victory, but it was a tight game. And now while the Eagles look like a different team, Green Bay's still dangerous. How tough of a matchup would that be if it is indeed Eagles-Packers?
Extremely. So let's break it down. Jordan Love has taken a step forward this year. Running back Josh Jacobs has 1,285 rushing yards, and they have 3 wide receivers that have 70 or more targets. And Jaden Reed, who I love out of Michigan State, he's more of a movable piece, kind of like a Randall Cobb. Romeo Doubs, and they also have Dontavian Wicks. They also have a tight end named Tucker Kraft who has a wide frame. He's a red zone option, and he has 645 receiving yards and leads the team with 7 touchdowns. So that's just their offense. Defensively, Xavier McKinney, he leads the Packers with pass breakups. They also have Kenny Clark, and they have Rashawn Gary. And Keyshawn Nixon's a player who doesn't get a lot of love nationally, but he is a player who is a outstanding kick returner, good nickel player, and he's really sort of rounded into form for them as well. They have a lot of playmakers on both sides.
Is this the worst possible first-round matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles? Like, was there any other team? And, this could still flip. Washington and Green Bay could change in the seeding, and you could have Washington coming in here, which I would feel much more comfortable with. The Eagles are going to beat that team in their sleep. I firmly believe that, playing a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And Washington is playing – they've had a great year. They're still playing out over their skis to me. They have those weird losses on their resume that I don't know. But, Green Bay, I know that they just didn't look great against the Minnesota Vikings in Week 17. I know they have weak spots as well. What's the biggest question facing them? Because I don't have a great answer to that one either.
I'm going to probably say offensive line. And it's easy to say because the Eagles have such a good offensive line that I think that has been their primary drawback. I named all the different offensive pieces that they have. So it's not just one player that you can fixate on if you're a defensive coordinator. You have to account for all of those players. But the offensive line has been susceptible at times. Defensively, they have some really strong pieces, especially on the defensive line. And on the back end, Xavier McKinney was one of the best offseason acquisitions in the entire free agent crop of players. So to me, that's where it is.
So you ready? This is the next level thinking that you're only going to get your on Kincade Salciunas, 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 97.5 The Fanatic. Because what I'm thinking now, we've had the Lions, Vikings, Rams, Bucks, and Green Bay Packers. We've broken down all of these teams, NFC playoff teams. One of them in the Green Bay Packers, we know for sure the Eagles are going to have to face. The 2 teams that were easiest to find major questions about are the 2 teams vying for the 1 seed. And that to me says, and I know you're a proponent of this for sure, that says it is very, very possible that the 1 seed gets knocked out before the NFC Championship game, whether it's Minnesota or whether it's Detroit. And that would mean if the Eagles take care of business, you're playing an NFC Championship game at Lincoln Financial Field.
That's the way that I'm saying it. And that's the way I've read it really towards the last couple weeks of the season when you start to see trends, right? I think Detroit has had an insurmountable amount of injuries on the defensive side. And Dan Campbell, to me, is sort of a loose cannon type of coach where he kind of seems to me like he coaches from the seat of his pants. He flies by the seat of his pants. And I don't think that's a successful recipe moving forward, especially when the stakes are high in the postseason. Then the Minnesota Vikings have the biggest question mark at the most critical position. So, yes, I think that there's a strong chance you could see an NFC Championship game here in Philadelphia.
That's a great thing, and that's something that makes you feel even more confident about the 2 seed and what the Eagles have accomplished. It makes it look a little bit less detrimental to their chances that they didn't put together enough wins for the 1 seed this year. Ultimately, it may not matter because you may not have to leave Lincoln Financial Field if, indeed, Andrew DeCecco and I's evaluations of these playoff teams are correct. Coming up next, we will get a little bit more of your reaction. We're going to do a check-in because something we talked about last week when we were together on the show, Andrew, was special teams. We're going to do just a little bit of a peek into the special teams setup of the Philadelphia Eagles and if we feel more confident heading into the postseason on that. And we'll continue to look at the other teams in the NFC playoff picture and the future potentials of teams around the NFL. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. We're back after this for more Kincade and Salciunas right here, 97.5 The Fanatic.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to yours.
6:47 the time here at Fanatic Studios. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. John Kincade also off. Both the guys will be back on Thursday to start out the New Year's schedule here at 97.5 The Fanatic. Andrew DeCecco to my left. We've been talking heavy Eagles today, but more in like the overall picture of the NFC playoff picture and also the NFL. Now, real quick before we get back to our friends on the text line, I do want to get a quick special teams check-in from you. How are we feeling about Jake Elliott and Braden Mann and that special teams unit going into the postseason? Are we in a better spot now in your perspective, Andrew, compared to where we were a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, well, quickly, because the last time we spoke, I'd mentioned that both Michael Clay, the Eagles special teams coordinator, and Nick Sirianni doubled down in their support of Braden Mann in terms of kickoffs. Let's not forget that his kickoff didn't land in the landing zone against Washington, and he really struggled with the conditions. All that being said, Thursday's practice, we're out there. We see Jake Elliott practice kickoffs, and Braden Mann's fielding them. That's interesting. And then we go to see that Jake Elliott is doing kickoffs during warm-ups for the game against the Cowboys, and then he kicks off. I think that they're in a better place in that area. I think that they did a nice job bottling up Kevontae Turpin, the Cowboys' electric returner. He only had 48 yards on 2 returns. And, look, Jay Lux Hunt said it best. He goes, we took care of him. He goes, he had a big return, but it was a penalty, so we don't count that. So I think, for all intents and purposes, they really did a nice job bouncing back from a tumultuous performance against the Commanders, and they sort of rounded back into form.
That's the thing, right? The Eagles learn very well, and they correct mistakes very well. A lot of teams in the NFL, we take that for granted. It's so easy from a fan's perspective to say, here's what's wrong, here's what I need this team to improve upon, do it. But it's complicated to fix issues in the NFL. It's not an easy sport to coach, and the Eagles have been really darn good at evaluating their own issues, fixing them quickly. It's something we talked about yesterday about how quickly they are fixing mistakes under Nick Sirianni. Like last year was the major anomaly. But in every other year of his tenure here as Eagles head coach, when they have a problem, they address them. And they address them in a way that leaves the team in a better spot. It appears they did that with special teams. So I'm with you. I don't have any worries about the special teams going into the postseason. And frankly, when you look at the quality of this Eagles team, if you're in a situation against any other team in the NFC playoffs where it comes down to Jake Elliott having to make like a 60-yard field goal to win a game, or even let's just go 50-plus, you did something wrong in that game that is atypical of the Philadelphia Eagles team that we've seen through 17 weeks. That has put you in that spot. If they take care of business, the kicking shouldn't matter. You're better than these teams, right? Is that too cocky to say?
No, I don't think so. And for anyone that still has questions remaining about Jake Elliott, and again, I totally understand it, but in a critical spot in that Commanders game, he made a 50-yard field goal to give the Eagles a 2-point lead in that game. That's as big of a spot as he's really had to make one. So if you're basing it off of that, one would expect that he's maybe turning the corner a little bit, and then he nailed his kickoffs. So I think that he's also building positive momentum moving forward into the postseason.
All right, what do we have on the text line, Brendan?
Yeah, we got somebody checking in on the Sirianni question if any of the starters go and approach him. They says, Saquon's a humble guy. He won't go to Sirianni and ask to play, but if anybody does it, it would be the offensive lineman. I think Sirianni would have to listen in that case and maybe let him go out there and get the 101 yards.
He'd have to listen. See, that's the thing. This is, as far as Nick Sirianni's role with this team goes, he's not calling offensive plays. He's obviously not handling the defense. That's all Vic Fangio on that side of the ball. He handles time management, he handles challenges, and he handles the decisions heading into game day. Like, he handles the setup of the team. That's his biggest responsibility. This is probably the biggest decision in that facet that he'll have to make all year, because there is no question in any other game, do I play this guy or not? If he's healthy, he plays. If you're trying to win the game, your best players play if they're able to get out there. This game is one where he's going to have to make his money by making the right decision, and part of that responsibility is to tell players no, even if they come into your office and are adamant that they want to do something. If it's not in the total best interest of the team, you have to put your team in the safest, best spot to give them the best chance at making a Super Bowl run, and the only way to do that is by resting the starters on Sunday.
Yeah, and as the head coach, you have to make difficult decisions. Sometimes they're not the most popular decisions, but you always have to look at with the team in mind and the ultimate goal in mind, and that is, if you're the Eagles, to win a Super Bowl. And I don't believe that anyone would have any rebuttals if he were to, which we all expect him to say, that they're going to sit this week. We'll have to wait and see, but I don't think that there will be a ton of pushback.
Now, we only have a couple of teams left in this conversation about questions surrounding other NFC playoff teams. Because with the Eagles starters most likely done for the regular season, I don't have many questions about this team. There are a little bit here and there type of questions where it's just like, is this pass rush at the highest level they could be playing at right now? Or if Jake Elliott does have to make a big kick with a tough year behind him, even though he's looked better lately, is that something that worries the fan base? I mean, I'm really, really stretching to try and find something that worries me about the Philadelphia Eagles right now. And other teams in the NFC playoff picture, they have those questions. We're also doing something about the future setup of NFL teams, and we have the bottom three set. I want to knock out a couple more here. So the Giants are at 32. The Las Vegas Raiders, and this is not current power rankings. This is like looking forward, even the next 2-3 years, who are in the worst and best spots in the NFL, because the Eagles are going to be pretty darn high on this list. Who are some other teams that are going to be down there as far as that's concerned when it comes to worst places in the NFL to be? The Raiders, Titans, the other two teams following the Giants. I'm just looking at the bottom of this list. I think we've got to put Cleveland down there with the dead cap money. Do you not think so?
Possibly. Their defense is in a pretty good spot right now.
That's true.
So two teams that are on my mind, Connor, I want to hear your thoughts. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers.
See, the Jaguars are weird, right? Because the talent level of Trevor Lawrence is still, there are still flashes of like, okay, this guy could be a really good quarterback in the perfect situation. There are a good amount of teams in the NFL who also have bad records that have questions at the quarterback position, which I see what running backs are doing around the NFL. That still, to me, is the most important spot on the football team is QB1. I don't know if I could put
Carolina, though.
Yeah, Carolina's a weird one if you don't believe Bryce Young is the guy, but I would almost put Chicago lower because you've seen less from Caleb Williams.
But they've invested, in, at least in theory, in their guy.
Yeah,
that they're going to build around.
That's true. And then Brendan Gunn brings up the Saints, who knows what's going on with them.
Oh, we got some interesting choices here.
We'll knock back those three teams as we start the 8 o'clock hour. We'll also have today's headlines with Brendan Gunn coming up at 8:05. And at 8:30, a little bit later on in the 8 o'clock hour, we'll have our second opinion segment. This is Andrew DeCecco's first time doing our second opinion segment. So we'll see what, I know you watched the game another time back between the Eagles and the Cowboys. We'll see if there's anything that's changed in our mindsets since our reaction show yesterday. So a lot more to come as we hit the halfway point this morning on Kincade and Salciunas. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. We're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
What to do with the starters. I'm Brendan Gunn, and this update is brought to you by Mattress Firm. Score deep discounts and deeper sleep during Mattress Firm's semi-annual sale and clearance. Get up to 60% off select mattresses and more. Plus, get a free adjustable base on qualifying purchases. After Week 17 around the NFL, the Eagles are now locked into the 2 seed in the NFC, and they're set to host a game at the Link during Wild Card Weekend, first round of the playoffs. With the New York Giants coming to town this week, in the final week of the regular season, the main question surrounding the Birds is, are the starters going to play? Jalen Hurts has missed the majority of the last 2 games with a concussion and might be rusty. Saquon Barkley is within reach of breaking the single-season rushing record. So although there might not be any ground for the team to make up in the standings, there may be room for some individual reasons why the starters may play in Week 18. Nick Sirianni spoke to the media yesterday and talked about where he stands as far as making a decision on the starters.
Still not there, and then, obviously I gave the players off today. They'll be back in a couple days, or they'll be back in. By the next time I talk to you, they'll be back in, and so I'll always inform them before I inform anybody else. But, still sorting through things right now at this particular moment.
The Sixers improved their win streak to 4 in a row last night with a 125-103 win over the Portland Trail Blazers. Joel Embiid led the team in scoring with 37 points. And the Flyers ring in the new year on the ice tonight. They play the San Jose Sharks. Puck drops at 8 p.m., so you might as well ring in your new year listening to The Fanatic right here, as the Flyers will be live at 8 p.m. I'm Brendan Gunn on the home of the 76ers and the Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
way in just a couple minutes with Brendan Gunn. Some interesting stuff in there always in that segment. So looking forward to that. But the big topics that we've been getting into today on Kincade and Salciunas. By the way, I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. Andrew DeCecco to my left, in for John Kincade. We've been discussing the questions facing the Philadelphia Eagles. If we have indeed seen their starters play for the last time in the regular season, there are not many. And then to build on top of that conversation, what are the questions facing the other NFC playoff teams that the Eagles could face down the line? Are they in lesser positions than the Birds? And across the board, the answer to that question seems to be yes. We've hit some teams that are a little bit tougher to find those major deficiencies in, though. And the interesting thing is they're the teams like the 4th and 6th and 7th seeds and stuff right now. So the feeling that the Eagles could have a home NFC Championship game if they do indeed advance to that round of the playoffs, it starts to look more and more possible the more you break down what is facing the potential 1-seed teams in Minnesota and Detroit. We're also having a little bit more of a future conversation because we have the opportunity. We have a week that there's not a lot of game to break down coming up, where we look at other teams in football and where they stand in the long-term view. What positions are the worst and the best? And we're starting from the bottom. So we have the Giants, Raiders, and Titans as the bottom 3 teams of the NFL future positioning. And then just to put it down, because we're running through basically like 3 teams in the last segment. There are a couple more that we mentioned, like Jacksonville is going to be down near the bottom. But I've just got written down here as I make my list. New Orleans at 29, Carolina Panthers at 28, Cleveland at 27. All of those teams with quarterback questions. Carolina probably a little bit less so than the other 2 teams, which is crazy considering what Bryce Young was viewed as after his rookie year. But Carolina, the big knock on them is they have very little talent anywhere else on the roster. Like Chuba Hubbard just had a nice year. But so any issues with New Orleans, Carolina, and Cleveland in that order? Like, we're splitting hairs trying to decide between teams this bad.
All teams I wouldn't want to be.
Exactly. Like, I don't think anyone is envious of those teams' positions.
No, and it's funny you mentioned the Panthers. Usually when you see a bad team, their offensive line more often than not is bad. The Panthers, however, their offensive line's okay. They just don't have a ton of playmakers on either side of the ball. So I think that they have a long ways to go in terms of rebuilding that program.
They do. Now, they're probably, of the teams we've gone through so far, the best chance for like a better year in 2025, in my opinion, just because they have played some teams tight. They seem to have faith in what they're doing. At least they're not a team that is losing by 50 every week and getting absolutely smoked and doing everything the wrong way, and there's problems inside the organization. They're a team that you look at and say, okay, they have guys that have to develop. Xavier Legette needs to develop. Bryce Young needs to develop. But you have the potential for that team who's played some good football teams tight, including your Philadelphia Eagles, to take a jump next year. Not a probably Washington jump, but especially in the NFC South, the division that feels like any team could win it any year. They could be one of the biggest risers in 2025, but not a team that anyone's saying, yeah, I'd like to be the Carolina Panthers right now.
No, they're banking on the development of Bryce Young, and I think head coach Dave Canales would be the coach to get the most out of Bryce Young. Adam Thielen, will have to see if he sticks around, and Xavier Legette, if he's able to really put it together, they could have some. He could be a top receiver for them. So, they have some pieces they have to develop.
This is just a beautiful thing where you look at what it's like to be the Philadelphia Eagles right now and be a part of this organization or be a fan of this team or someone who covers this team. We are spoiled, so spoiled with how this team has bounced back from the last year collapse. They've done an incredible job.
This exercise gives a lot of perspective on that.
It does, and it makes you almost feel silly for the worries that you might have had throughout the year when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, well, it is 8:05. It is now time for today's headlines with Brendan Gunn.
Today's headlines with Connor Thomas.
It's Brendan Gunn today. Connor Thomas in the other room.
Hasn't been me for like a month, I feel.
We need to get the radio voice guy, put my name on it a little bit.
We'll work on that.
But yeah, today we're going to get into the owner of another team that we haven't talked about yet. I suppose they'll be pretty far down on this list, but owner Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, prior to Sunday's game, well, he was met with a nice welcoming from the Philadelphia Eagles fans. Take a listen.
Jerry, you're doing a great job this year, man. Keep it going. Keep it going, Jerry. Great job. Four more years. Keep doing what you're doing, Jerry. We love you, Phillies. We love you. I know you do. We love you.
Yeah,
Was that him saying, I know you do?
Yes.
Wow.
So he took it in stride. But his son also went on radio yesterday talking about the Birds. He said, I know everybody has their different battles within the cap, hit at different times. Philly's going to have their coming their way with tough decisions pretty soon.
No, they're not. No, they're not. See, this is why this is why they're dumb. They can't even evaluate other organizations they're competing with. Now, first and foremost, Jerry Jones going to that game in Philadelphia is insane. I understand he's the owner. I understand he wants to be there to watch the team that he owns plays. But you know that game is not going to go your way. You know that you're significantly a dog in that game on the lines, and you're going on the road, and there's no upside to Jerry Jones being at Lincoln Financial Field for that game. I would have stayed home if I was him.
He wanted attention. He needs attention.
Well, he got it.
He craves attention.
Do you think he was aware that they were saying, we appreciate you being the GM because you're a total dunce at this point?
Yes.
You mess up. Do you think he was aware of that? Or do you think they were just saying thank you because you guys stink overall? Or is he self-aware enough to realize that he's the one messing it up?
No,
no,
absolutely not.
But he's self-aware enough to know that the Eagles are not actually thanking him for they're thanking him for him being terrible at his job, and he understands that that's the perspective here. I think he believes though that people in Dallas still have faith in him, which should not be the case.
I don't know if he lives in a cave. I'm sure he doesn't, but I don't know how you can have that.
Humongous cave.
I don't know how he can misconstrue that. I think people in Dallas, from what I've been able to glean anyway, are very frustrated with his handlings.
Yeah, it's just so dumb for him to even show up to that game. He knew he was going to get ripped. He knew he was going to get screamed at. His team got smoked. I hope he had a long flight home. What else do we have, Brandon?
Yeah, long live Jerry Jones. Today, New Year's Eve, we got to get into the New Year's resolutions. I don't care about your guys. If you could fix one thing with the team going into the new year, what would it be? And obviously, we want the Eagles to stay the same. New year, same Eagles, hopefully. But what else in Philly sports would you like to see resolved in 2025?
Man, a New Year's resolution that I would like to see. It's tough because the Eagles are in a really, really good spot. The Phillies are...
No more load management.
No more load management would be a great New Year's... I love that. And I understand the perspective of the players and people resting guys. We're talking about load management for the Eagles right now, but it makes sense because they're not playing for anything. When it comes to Joel Embiid and Paul George for the Philadelphia 76ers, having them healthy is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. But at this point, you're so far behind the eight ball when it comes to where this team should be seeding-wise, you got to go out and you got to play every chance you have the opportunity. I'm sorry, but you're so far down in the standing. And they're not in a bad spot. They're already in the play-in conversation. They're not far out of a spot where they could be outside of the play-in. They could very much make an actual seed and not have to play in the play-in this season. But you're not going to get there if every back-to-back you're missing two of your best three players.
Right, and you see how dominant they can be when all their stars are on the court together. So I think the resolution should be get rid of load management because the Sixers are showing that they can get better the more that they get that on-court cohesiveness, and they can't do that with the load management.
I've got a resolution for the Flyers, and it doesn't affect this season, but it will be in this calendar year because, remember, we're talking 2025 in general. So the next season for the Philadelphia Flyers will start. Their resolution, and this is to Danny Briere and Keith Jones, start thinking about how you're going to build around Matvei Michkov. Start thinking about how you're going to build around a superstar in the making because they've been really good at the rebuild portion of what they've handled since taking over responsibilities in the front office. But now that shifts a little bit to next year being the year where this year probably still sellers at the deadline, not going to be really a playoff team most likely. But they're going to have to start considering how do we bring in more talent to build around Matvei Michkov, and that's something we have not seen them do yet, the acquiring of more talent outside of the draft. That's something that I want them to make their resolution, have a great plan to start to compete.
I like that. Obviously, Michkov is he's a superstar, and yes. I think that he has brought excitement back to Flyers hockey, but to fully maximize his potential in that window, which is going to be pretty sizable, you got to start to bring in talent and build around him.
Absolutely. Brendan Gunn, what else do we have?
Yeah,
or do you have a resolution?
I would just say, obviously, the Phillies would be, don't chase in the playoffs. But I would say an actual tangible one, Alec Boehm, please just put your big boy pants on. You can actually fix that in 2025. You're going to be here at this point. Just go out there and don't, show your emotions as much. Get it together. But I'll wrap it up with today's replay and pose a question to you guys.
If this past Sunday, was the last time we've seen the Eagles starters play in the regular season. Have you seen everything you need to see?
In the regular season, yes, I've seen everything there is to see. I think this is the best roster in football, the best team in football. They displayed that the last 2 months of the season. Heading into the postseason, though, it is a different monster. There's a lot of inexperience on the defensive side. 2 rookie cornerbacks. You got Zach Bond playing in the postseason as a starter, as a linebacker for the first time. Nakobe Dean as well. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis only played 1 game last year in the postseason. It was a blowout from the beginning. Does the inexperience scare you guys at all, or does Vic Fangio at the helm get you guys comfortable?
I'm not remotely nervous about it. I'm not. And I could have been if they didn't have the performance they did against Dallas on Sunday. After that Washington defensive performance, there were some nervous people in the fan base. But it was an anomaly, and it was proven by what they did against Dallas. They came out and showed that 11 of the last 12 games, they've been outstanding. And you look at that Washington game, it was a blip on the radar. I'm not worried about the young defensive players remotely.
Yeah, I don't think you should have any apprehension whatsoever. The Eagles have proven that all 3 levels are constantly in communication. The pass rush and the coverage usually they're able to marry those two. Vic Fangio has his defense playing assignment sound football. They rally to the football, and they play with toughness and physicality. That travels no matter where you go.
Great job, Brendan, there with today's headlines. And it's a perfect lead into what I wanted to talk to you about next, Mr. DeCecco, because the takeaways for the Philadelphia Eagles, they've become, out of nowhere, a calling card for this defense. We were 2 months into the season saying, hey, the defense is starting to figure stuff out as far as the bend don't break and the scoring. But the one thing that took longer than anything else to come to fruition was the ability to turn the ball over, the ability to force other teams to get your offense back on the field. And now all of a sudden, the Eagles are going insane with turnovers. They have 9 in just their last 2 games. That's an unbelievable mark. But people might look at that and say, and you brought this up, I believe it was you, said how turnovers come in bunches.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that sustainable, though? Because if that is the thought process, you can also hit a turnover slump. How sustainable is this turnover barrage by the Philadelphia Eagles defense that we've seen recently?
Well, I believe that it is sustainable, and a lot of the players have echoed the sentiment of, they come in bunches, and when you practice this technique, which is punching out the football with violence, and constantly having a nose for the football and a sort of trying to affect ball carriers in a certain way where you're not going for the tackle primarily, you're trying to get the football out as well. That is something that I believe the more you do it, the more apt you are to taking the football away. And that's something that has been preached from the coaching staff, and the players realize that. I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson even mentioned this after the game, that the Eagles rank number 1 in terms of punch-outs after a week, whatever he mentioned. But it is a point of emphasis for sure.
And that's a good thing. Now, I don't understand why that would ever not be a point of emphasis. And I feel like we've seen Eagles teams of the past or other teams around the NFL this year, and it's just like they just can't force turnovers. I'm not trying to say it's easy to create turnovers at the NFL level. Like, it's high-level professional football. But
being in the right place at the right time and all that has a lot to do with it.
Very, very important. And communication is key. Trusting your guys. I brought up the point. It was either yesterday or pregame show. Days run together this time of year. But brought up the point of, like, trusting that other guys are going to be where they're supposed to be. So if you make a bit of a riskier play on a ball carrier and try and get the ball out, and maybe that leads to, hey, I don't make the most formed tackle and they break through, you have another guy behind you, another level of defense, another guy pursuing the ball, people not giving up on the play. So the overall quality of the defense does lend, I guess, to the ability to take risks playing the ball. It's just, I don't think this is sustainable to this level, right? They're not going to have 4 turnovers a game.
9 turnovers the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, like, that's just not going to happen. But if you can force even 1, 2, I mean, Jalen Hurts has been really, really good at taking care of the football, and so has everyone on the Philadelphia Eagles offense. That's something where you say 1 turnover can make all the difference in the game. And if you don't think the Eagles can get a turnover a game through the NFC playoffs, that's crazy considering how good they've been at it recently.
And you mentioned something very interesting, Connor, and I think that it deserves a re-mention here, because what the Eagles do is one player might be punching out the football and they may not have the typical form, but there's always somebody else there to clean up on the play. And that happens with communication, with attention to detail. That starts with head coach Nick Sirianni preaching that, Vic Fangio implementing that, and their position coaches making sure that they're reinforcing that, and you see a very tough assignment sound team. And there's always a couple of guys that rally to the football on a given play.
Right, and that's something that's important because it's rare that you see the guy that forces the fumble recover their own. You're making that hit, you're falling on the guy, you don't know where the ball's bouncing. It takes another guy or two in there to potentially be the one to recover the fumble, and that's something that the Eagles always seem to do this year, where when that ball's out, it is very rare that you see the Eagles force a fumble, especially in the open field, that they do not recover the football, which we've seen the Eagles plenty of times this year on the offensive side of the ball with fumbles when they were a problem earlier in the year for Jalen Hurts, that they would fall on it themselves. A lineman would end up with it. We saw the weird Kenny Pickett play where someone caught his arm, and it looked worse than what it actually was. There was a bit of the replay where everyone's out of the screen, and it just looks like he's dropping the ball into the ground.
It's like a video game glitch or something.
Saquon Barkley right there to recover that fumble and make sure that the ball is retained by the Philadelphia Eagles. So it goes both ways, but the defensive side of the ball, forcing these turnovers, it's something that has really shown up recently for the Eagles, and if that's something they can continue, that's going to be a big part of the equation going forward. Brennan, as far as the turnovers are concerned, because I know you're a worrier a little bit. The Commanders are the greatest team in the history of football, and there are some tough matchups coming for the Birds. Do you think that this is sustainable?
9 turnovers in 2 games, not sustainable.
But the ability to turn the ball over. Like, let's go with 2 a game.
2 a game? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, this defense has done it for quite some time now where they're winning the turnover battle. Even when they win it, it hasn't amounted to wins in the last 2 weeks. But I would say they would go out there, turn the ball over a couple of times. It's just one of those things where when you're sitting here in the regular season last year, it just didn't bounce their way. And when it does bounce your way, it kind of bounces your way throughout the season. There's no rhyme or reason to it a lot of the time. You punch it out, it goes to you. Sometimes you punch it out, it goes to the other team. This year, it just seems like you get a fumble, it's going to you guys. So I think it is sustainable.
It's kind of like home runs in baseball. It's just like, I don't know, you can make hard contact all the time, but sometimes you don't just have the angle or whatever. And then when you're feeling good and the team's hitting well, it seems they come in bunches. And there's no true exact science to it, even though launch angle folks think there is. That's kind of the NFL turnover game, or just turnovers in football in general. You're right. The luck factor of it is a big part of it, which shouldn't scare people. It's just a sign that it can be a little volatile, the total numbers of turnovers.
And I don't want to take anything away from the defense because they have to be in the right spot to be able to get on those fumbles, to get those interceptions. And I credit Vic Fangio for putting these guys in position where they're playing without regard. They're going out there. They know someone's going to have their back. They know their guys on their team are, if they mess up, there's going to be somebody behind them that can go out there and make the play because everyone's where they're supposed to be at all times for the most part.
Yeah, the hustle and effort is rampant across the team. Do you remember when Dallas Goedert fumbled the football and Grant Calcaterra comes from across the field and dives on it? Players are always in the right place at the right time, or they hustle to the football with urgency, and that is really universal throughout the roster.
And that's culture, man. And that's what Nick Sirianni has done really, really well this year is he's got these guys wanting to play for him and playing in the right way. Now, real quick, because this is a simple one, as we continue to go through our questions for NFC playoff teams, things that those teams should be concerned about that the Eagles are not currently dealing with, which then puts the Eagles logically in a better position than these teams. The next team we'll look at is the divisional opponent in the postseason picture, the Washington Commanders. And I think it's pretty simple to say what their biggest question is going in. It's inexperience
at quarterback.
Yeah. Yes. Jaden Daniels is a great player this year. He's had a strong rookie year. He's never played in a postseason game. It is different. I mean, we've seen great quarterbacks take a while to figure out postseason football. The Eagles don't have that issue. Jalen Hurts is not inexperienced. A lot of these players on this roster are not inexperienced. They have a good amount of players still here from the 2022 Super Bowl appearing team.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels is exceptionally athletic, and he can make plays, but you worry about him being prone to turnovers or trying to force things in a high-leverage moment trying to make a play. That's where I think will be the Commanders' demise.
All right, so that's basically every NFC playoff opponent. I mean, I guess we could do the Falcons as well, but they're on the outside looking in right now, and if they make it in, I don't think anyone's worried about a team with Michael Penix as the quarterback. Like the Falcons, it's almost not worth doing that exercise for. So we could wrap that up a little bit later on in the show and just give our final thoughts on those questions and why the Eagles are in a better spot. But coming up next, we've got to give our final thoughts on the game against the Cowboys. We've got our second opinion segment coming up. And this one's going to be interesting because I think we spent so much time looking forward to what the Saquon decision is going to be yesterday that there were some big parts of that game that we did not get a chance to break down. So we'll get into that coming up. And our second thoughts on our evaluation of the Eagles' dominant win over the Cowboys. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. We're back from Kincade Salciunas after this.
Fanatic Sports Update.
To play the starters or to not to play the starters? I'm Brendan Gunn, and this update is brought to you by the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety. Did you know that driving under the influence of marijuana is illegal? Get high, get a DUI. A message from the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety. After Week 17 around the NFL, the Eagles are now locked into the 2 seed in the NFC, and they are set to host a home game at the Link during Wild Card Weekend, with the New York Giants coming to town in Week 18. The main question surrounding the Birds is, are the starters going to play? Jalen Hurts missed the majority of the last 2 games with a concussion and might be rusty. Saquon Barkley is within reach of breaking the single-season rushing record. So although there might not be any ground to make up in the standings, there may be some individual reasons why the starters may play in Week 18. Nick Sirianni spoke to the media yesterday and talked about where he stands as far as making a decision on that goes.
We sure spent a lot of time about takeaways on protecting the football. You know, it's
That was not the cut that was supposed to play, so I apologize. But Nick Sirianni said he has not made up his mind quite yet. The Sixers, they moved their win streak to 4 in a row last night with a 125-103 win over the Portland Trail Blazers. Joel Embiid led the team in scoring with 37 points. And the Flyers, they're going to be ringing in the new year on the ice. They play the San Jose Sharks tonight. Puck drops at 8 p.m. So you might as well ring in the new year right here on The Fanatic, because we'll have complete coverage of that game tonight. I'm Brendan Gunn on the home of the 76ers and the Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Can you feel it?
The Eagles are back to being... which means coming up, we're going to get into our second opinion segment where we take a revisiting of everything going on in that game against the Cowboys. When you win 41-7 over a division rival and force 4 turnovers, there's a lot of things that we probably didn't get a chance to fully break down. So very interested to see where we all take this. We're also just discussing the turnovers and takeaways by the Philadelphia Eagles defense and whether or not it's sustainable. And Nick Sirianni, I want you to hear this real quick before we get to the second opinion segment. He did talk about that being a focus and something that the Eagles' defensive side of the ball has really made a point to look at in this season.
We sure spend a lot of time about takeaways on protecting the football. You know, it's an emphasis in every meeting that we have. Every time they're out in the field, guys are doing a great job of getting after the ball, and sometimes that's just the way this goes. And you know, you have a streak where you start, you know, you open up some turnovers, guys get confidence on how to do it, and the techniques and all those different things that play into it. You know, you just kind of get on the roll, and I guess that's kind of what's happened.
Okay, so on a roll. I mean, the only thing that I look at when I hear all of this stuff about momentum, they come in bunches. We're on a roll right now. The confidence builds. It's just there's not anything like crazy tangible about that continuing, but there never is with turnovers. We know in the NFL, some of turnovers is luck. It's being in the right spot at the right time. It's the ball bouncing the right way. It's a whole bunch of factors that contribute to whether or not you force as many turnovers as the Eagles have through the past 2 games, which is 9, by the way, an insane number. But they're focused on it. They talk about it all the time. It's definitely an emphasis that the team places on it, and that's a good thing because it's the most important statistic when it comes to the box score at the end of the game. You win the turnover battle, you win the game more often than not.
And the key to the turnovers is C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Over these airways, before the season, I'd mentioned that I believe that C.J. Gardner-Johnson was going to be the Eagles' most impactful offseason addition. Now, Saquon Barkley exists, of course, but the reason being is that C.J. Gardner-Johnson has a nose for the football, which is obviously the primary to our conversation here, but he also sets the tone and sort of instills that mindset of playing right along the edge there. You don't want to step over
sometimes
the line.
Over the line, right?
Sometimes over the line.
But, yes, he's been a big part of that, and that's why they needed to bring him back to be that guy. All right, it's time for our second opinion segment.
You might not always agree with what you hear. Sometimes you need a second opinion. Brought to you by the consultants in medical oncology and hematology.
Yes, and real quick, just love to the consultants in medical oncology and hematology. CMOH is the number one place you should go when you get a cancer diagnosis. They helped out our own John Kincade. And whether it's your first opinion or you need to go to them for a second opinion, they should be the call that you make. Now, this was a game against the Dallas Cowboys where really it cemented a lot of stuff for the future. And we spent very little time compared to big-time victories over a division rival actually looking at the game rather than looking forward. So the one thing that I want to just bring up, and this guy has gotten a little bit of love this year, but because we have the opportunity to get a little deeper into the nitty-gritty, I want to talk about number 81. Grant Calcaterra had an insane catch on Sunday against the Cowboys, and it was really his only big impact in the game on the passing side of the ball. But blocking, he has done an incredible job. And Dallas Goedert has had 2 extended absences this year where he has missed time due to injury. And Grant Calcaterra has stepped up more than I think anybody ever believed he was going to. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler. He's not going to be an All-Pro guy. I don't know that he's ever going to be like a starting tight end at the NFL level. Those are questions for his future. It's not something we're focused on right now. But to not recognize what he has done filling in for somebody, you could argue that he has been the most impactful second stringer for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. And that is something that deserves to be celebrated. And you saw another great circus catch by him on Sunday that was big in a time of the game where the Eagles needed to get something going.
That's a really good pick. And mine is going to be the second-year player who was rotating with the first team at corner. He stepped up this year. He didn't start. He embraced his role on special teams. I've been keeping an eye on this throughout the season, but on a special teams unit that has been maligned for the past week, Keely Ringo, playing gunner, has done an outstanding job. He's on the 2025 Pro Bowl ballot, by the way, but he, in large part, was to give the credit to for him being able to bottle up Kevontae Turpin on punts. The Cowboys had 0 punt returns, opportunities, or yards, and I think a lot of that has to do with Keely Ringo being able to win his matchup, get down the field, and bear down and put some pressure on the returner. So he deserves a lot of credit. I know you have to win outside the margins, and he allows you to do that.
See, that I love talking a little bit of special teams and Keely Ringo and everything. That's a deep cut of Philadelphia Eagles knowledge that you only get from Andrew DeCecco. And these are the guys that you need to acknowledge when you get to this point in the season. Because, one, we're not having major conversations about the Eagles roster. Listen, if the Eagles had major deficiencies, Keely Ringo's name would not be brought up. We'd be talking about what Jalen Hurts needs to do, what Saquon Barkley needs to do, what Nick Sirianni needs to coach, what the defensive side of the ball, guys like Jalen Carter and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay need to do if this team's going to win in the postseason. We know those guys are all talented, so it frees us up to talk about the players that exist in the margins that are the difference between a good team and a great team. That's a great pick there. And speaking of gunners, B. Gunn, what do you have?
Yeah, it's a guy that I asked actually Andrew DeCecco about on the post-game show the other day, but Quinyon Mitchell bounced back from a tougher game against the Commanders, and I think the Cowboys saw something on film because they targeted him more than any other team has all season long. And Quinyon Mitchell went out there and battled. I know he let up that touchdown. That was a great pass, though. Great play, great route on that one. So that was just a tough play. Can't blame Quinyon Mitchell, but he bounced back from a game where the Cowboys saw something on film. They went out there and tried to target him, and he didn't let up anything major. Like, he went out there and battled after a tougher game against the Commanders. So I have nothing to say bad about Quinyon Mitchell at all. I just appreciate what he went out there and did after a bounce-back game. Hopefully, there's nothing else to show on tape where other teams are going to target him going forward.
I'll tell you this right now. I kind of want other teams to target him. I would love to see people throw the ball Quinyon Mitchell's way.
Because he's going to pick them off.
He's going to lock down whoever he faces. No, I don't think he's going to. I'm not convinced he will ever have an interception. He has had too many close calls this year to not have one. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson always being in the same spot as him is also not ideal for his personal accolades when it comes to turnovers. And that's not a big deal. I'm saying most of that tongue-in-cheek. But legitimately, if your plan going up against the Philadelphia Eagles is to target Quinyon Mitchell, you're losing that football game. That is a stupid plan. And if the Cowboys saw something on tape that tricks teams into doing that because he didn't have his best game against the Washington Commanders in Week 16, I hope that persists. I hope people keep throwing his way. That is who I want to see the ball go towards on the Philadelphia Eagles defense if it's in the air.
That was a good pick by UB Gunn. I think we all had some really good selections. I was close to going with Oren Burks because I thought Oren Burks did some really good things in that game. After it looked like early in that game, the Cowboys were targeting him in the running game. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. rotated in for a couple of series, and then Oren Burks comes back in.
Forces
a fumble on Jake Ferguson, and Jordan Davis pounces on it.
It's just incredible how this team, and thank you to the consultants in medical oncology and hematology, CMOH. Go ahead and check them out if you need a first opinion, second opinion, any opinion on a cancer diagnosis. They're the people to call, the great folks over there that helped out our very own John Kincade. That's the beautiful thing about this Philadelphia Eagles team is they have guys stepping up, whether it's necessity or whether it's, hey, we're choosing to go away from the starters because we're beating the brakes off the Dallas Cowboys. When lower level players, like I use lower level in just comparison to the starters, but when second string or third string players have been pushed into the spotlight this year.
Reserves
is a great way to put it. Every single one of them has been, honestly, serviceable at least. Like, I can't think of a single guy that was put into a position this year where I was like, well, he really, really cost the Eagles. There was no upside to that. They have gotten so much contribution.
Fred Johnson, Grant Calcaterra,
Tyler Steen,
Isaiah Rodgers.
Yes, Tristan
McCollum, yeah.
Like, guys like that. Even Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. stepping in for Nakobe Dean going down. And the Eagles have been remarkably healthy this year compared to what a regular NFL season is. The guys that have missed time, well, they've missed time for short periods of time and have come back. It's just been such an impressive job, top to bottom, by this Philadelphia Eagles roster. And that points to one thing. Well, it points to two things. It points to the individual players who are doing that and their focus and their willingness to work, even though they're not in the biggest role on the team. But it points to the fact that the coaching is just so much improved compared to last year. Last year, the starters couldn't figure stuff out. Now, you could bring in the final man on the roster and say, hey, you're starting today. And they would be where they're supposed to be. And they would make a play that makes you say, hey, I wasn't expecting that from him, but we got it. and that is Vic Fangio having his guy prepared. That is Kellen Moore having his guys prepared. That's Nick Sirianni building the culture to allow those guys to feel comfortable, to work into their roles. It's just, I know that it sounds like I'm just gassing up the Eagles like crazy today, but there's no reason not to. You should be this confident in this team. There are only good things to say about the Philadelphia Eagles right now, and they've done that themselves. And to be here after where we were a year ago, as we were flipping the calendar from 2023 into 2024, the question with the Philadelphia Eagles is this organization imploding? Are they completely broken? What do you do if this collapse continues? Like, how do you ever bounce back from this in the offseason? Is there anyone on the roster you don't have questions about? That's completely flipped this year. And it's because of Howie Roseman and the coaching staff and then those players executing on the plans that the people up top have put into place. It is a masterclass in organization and football team building that the Philadelphia Eagles have put together this year. And now is where we really find out if it's going to pay off as they get ready to head towards the postseason. And the games that are must-wins, some might say. Everyone better say. If I hear one question of, like, do you consider this a must-win? I hate when you get the random reporters in there that aren't there all year that ask that question to a coach on a playoff game day or something.
Trust me, we hate it too.
Yeah, we don't need that. But this is the big time of year. This is when the margins for error get thin, and the Eagles have put themselves in a damn good position. Coming up next, we're going to get back to our breakdown of the future situations for NFL teams and look at some of the other bottom-tier teams and who are some potentials for big risers. There are some teams in your division, one that you just beat soundly on Sunday that we could talk about coming up as one of the worst spots in the NFL. So we'll talk about that, and we'll also look into some calls and texts as well. 610-632-0975 is your way to jump into the program. I'm Connor Thomas for the home. That was an update thing. You see, I'm not used to this. Connor Thomas here on 97.5 The Fanatic, more Kincade and Salciunas after this. talking a lot today about the Philadelphia Eagles and the teams surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles. It is that time of the year where you turn your attention to who is the most dangerous in the postseason. And you also get the opportunity to do so because the Eagles do not need their Week 18 matchup with the Giants to go any direction for them to be the 2 seed. The Philadelphia Eagles are, for all intents and purposes, locked into the 2 seed. They are going to be in that position heading into the postseason. This game does not matter, especially with Detroit winning last night. Now Detroit and Minnesota will play for the 1 seed this coming Sunday. Now that's a great job of scheduling, by the way, by the NFL to have Minnesota, Detroit the final week. Nobody saw this coming from the Vikings. There's no way that anyone could have predicted that this would be a battle for the 1 seed in the NFC, head-to-head, mano-a-mano. But that's a found money for the NFL scheduling department there to have that game in the final week. So that'll be interesting to watch from the Eagles' perspective, probably more so than the Eagles matchup with the New York
Hold on
Giants.
now. You know, I'm somebody who likes the preseason, so I'm going to get a chance to see Trevor Keegan probably for the first time, E.J. Jenkins get some action,
These are your guys.
Anais Smith, Will Shipley.
This is the Andrew DeCecco dream here that you get to. You probably wish they would have clinched like 3 weeks ago, so you could just get a couple games.
I do the
worth of-
evaluation for final 3 weeks of the year. That'd be great. But yeah, you're probably going to see a lot of these back. Keely Ringo, who I just mentioned in the previous segment.
Love that. And as much as that does excite you, I know for most people out there, they're like, yeah, wake me up when Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and everybody are back on the field. But that is the benefit that the Eagles get, and the benefit it gives us from the outside perspective is to start to take a look at who the opponents are that you could face down the road in the postseason, and who are the teams that have bigger questions than you, which so far, it's all teams in the NFC that have those bigger questions than the Philadelphia Eagles. There's only one team really in football that I think you could say does not have a question, at least to the level of something you might be worried about with the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is the 1 seed in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. And some people might say, well, they haven't had the greatest year. They're barely beating teams. They took forever to score over 30 points. Bottom line is that team has won 2 straight Super Bowls. They have a great quarterback, a great coach. They're healthy enough, and they just find ways to win. They've been here before. They've done this before. You'd be dumb to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs. So if the only team that you could argue is in a better position than you is a team that has won back-to-back Super Bowls, I would say that you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Oh, absolutely. I think the Kansas City Chiefs, to your point, Connor, is probably the only team that, and the Eagles would have to see them in the Super Bowl, of course, but you have to almost disregard what they've done in the regular season, the Chiefs, because they find ways to win football games. They had Patrick Mahomes. But when you're measuring yourself against a 2-time Super Bowl champion in the Kansas City Chiefs, I think you're doing all right.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good place to be, especially considering that they are the 1 seed in the AFC and have done really everything you could have expected them to do in the regular season, considering what they were, well, not even what they were up against, but just like having the pressure of trying to win the Super Bowl for the 3rd straight time. It's remarkable that they are where they are, but we'll worry about that in February. Looking at the NFC, there's no team in better position than the Philadelphia Eagles, including, and this is in our opinion, but including the 2 teams vying for the 1 seed. So with that in mind, Brendan, we've been talking about a lot of stuff. What do we have on the text line?
Yeah, we got a no-name texter checking in. He says, you guys have convinced me that they need to rest the starters this week, but I see the point of people that say the Super Bowl's not promised, so go out and get the record.
I see that final part, right, is very interesting to me. But I'm glad that we're hearing from people. We heard from some people yesterday that are saying that we are convincing them to sit these starters. We're winning people over to this argument.
Just trying to offer perspective and
well, no, see, that's fair, but in sports talk radio, if you're convincing people to come over to your side, like nobody ever switches sides. You have your opinion, and you are cemented where you want to be. If we're getting texts, and we've gotten multiple this week of saying, yeah, I'm hearing you guys have won me over, that means there's a right side of this argument. That means there is a clear right side of this argument. Because if it was a truly debatable thing, we'd have people with their feet dug in saying, no, they need to play. Like the fact that people are changing their opinions on this shows that it's an emotional reaction to say, I would love to see Saquon get the record. And that's fair. If you're a fan of this team and you want to see greatness from them and individual players on the team, I get that. But as the week progresses, you got to let your brain take over a little bit and say it's not the best situation for him to play or for any of the starters to play when you don't need it. It is an unnecessary risk.
It does not make any sense. You can't do that when your offensive line and Saquon Barkley are the key to the Eagles' offense making that deep postseason run.
There's just no justification to it. And there's another part of this discussion that I want to have coming up. Now, you talked about something in a break that you want to get into about player development for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that is definitely something that has shined for them this year. But I want to talk about, too, in that whole resting the starters conversation, it's Saquon-centric. But should it really be Jalen Hurts-centric? I've had this concern about rust in the back of my mind, and I'm very interested to see how many people share this perspective. So we will talk about Jalen Hurts 2 weeks off heading into the postseason. Is that something you worry about? Coming up next, along with a fun discussion on how the Eagles have been exceptional at player development in 2024. So a lot more to get into as we head into the final hour of Kincade and Salciunas. I'm Connor Thomas filling in for Andrew Salciunas. We're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
What to do with the starters. I'm Brendan Gunn, and this update is brought to you by Moyer Indoor and Outdoor Services. Locally family owned and operated for 150 years, Moyer's been keeping lawns green and lush and homes pest free. Go to eMoyer.com for free estimates. After Week 17 around the NFL, the Eagles are now locked into the 2 seed in the NFC, and they are set to host a home game at the Link during Wild Card Weekend, the first round of the NFL playoffs. And with the New York Giants coming to town this week in Week 18, the main question surrounding the Birds is, are the starters going to play? Jalen Hurts has missed the majority of the last 2 games with a concussion and may be rusty. Saquon Barkley is within reach of breaking the single-season rushing record. So although there might not be a ground for improvement as far as the standings go in Week 18, there may be some individual reasons why the starters may play. Nick Sirianni spoke to the media yesterday, and he talked about where he stands as far as making that decision goes.
Still not there, and then, obviously I gave the players off today. They'll be back in a couple days, or they'll be back in. By the next time I talk to you, they'll be back in, and so I'll always inform them before I inform anybody else. But, still sorting through things right now at this particular moment.
The Sixers improved their win streak to 4 in a row last night with the 125-103 win over the Portland Trail Blazers. Joel Embiid led the team in scoring with 37 points. And the Flyers, they're closing out the 2024 calendar year on the ice. They play the San Jose Sharks tonight. Puck drops at 8 p.m., so you might as well close out 2024 listening to The Fanatic because we'll have the complete call for that game. I'm Brendan Gunn on the home of the 76ers and the Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
been an interesting show here on Kincade Salciunas. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas. On Thursday, we will have the normal crew back. So Johnny will be back in the seat that is currently occupied by Andrew DeCecco. Andrew Salciunas will be back hosting the show. And I'll go back to the board for the first time in what feels like a month. Brendan Gunn, by the way, has been doing a wonderful job filling in, producing while I sit in this room, as well as everybody has who has filled in on this show. That's the holidays, right? Other people have to step up. It's not just the Eagles who are going to the second and third stringers or the reserves that for the positions that they're currently in.
You're the Matt Stairs of pinch hitters.
Listen, I don't think I can live up to that. I don't want that mantle.
You have lived up to it. What do you mean? I don't think I can. You have.
I can't put myself in that conversation. If the Eagles win the Super Bowl, then maybe I'll start to, you got to have a championship tied with the Matt Stairs comparison. So we've still got work to do to get that all set up. But I appreciate the sentiment there from Andrew DeCecco, who you just heard. And we've been talking a lot about the Philadelphia Eagles and what their path to winning that Super Bowl could be. The first step, and we're all in agreement here. Now, I know the fan base is still kind of all over the place with this. We're winning people over slowly, one by one, individual by individual. We're winning the argument of rest the starters on Sunday. It is not worth it to risk potential injury that could affect your ability to win the Super Bowl to chase this record. It's just not. And it sucks. It really does. It makes you think about all the rushes that Saquon Barkley had this year, and could he have stayed up on this one? Could he have broken that one? If he had had a better game here, if they had used a different game plan through the first 4 weeks. And I'm not putting any of it on Saquon saying, oh, well, he hasn't been good enough. I'm just saying, there are so many things that change over the course of an NFL season that break this way or that way that you wish that he could have just break one more 75-yard run. Yeah. And that's capable for him. That's a lot to ask. Where we'd be in a situation where, he needs 25 yards and you can go play him for a quarter and he's going to get it and then you'll be fine. But it's not realistic.
Maybe even a series.
Right, exactly. It's not realistic for him needing over 100 yards still. To go out there and play on Sunday, which sucks because it would be really fun, but it's the only way to view this, right? Yeah. There's no alternative.
That's it. I mean, I don't really think it's a discussion. I think you're seeing a lot of folks start to see things the way that we're seeing it. And look, we've given rational opinions as to why, and I think that that's all that we could do. We're just providing the information. There's so many things in the column that we're in, the camp that we're in. And there's only one thing in the other column, and that is Saquon having a chance at history.
But, I have this weird battle that rages inside me sometimes where I try and be logical and rational on these airwaves, but I also am dumb. And I have a dumb sports brain.
That might be a drop.
There's not many people that say dumber things than Connor.
See, Ricky knows. Ricky Metallico. You can hear him best show ever. I have this still weird tendencies of a fan where it's just it would be really cool if Saquon Barkley broke the record. And what are the real chances that anything bad happens to him and you can go out there and get it? I have this in the back of my mind.
You're a tortured soul.
And I have to fight against it. So if that battle's raging for you as well as a fan where you're yeah, I know it's probably the right thing to not play him, but how cool would it be if he did play and he did break the record and we could say that and you could get out of it with everybody healthy and everyone will be fine. There's a chance you could do that. I get it. I'm not saying you guys are insane for wanting the record, but it would be insane to risk the Super Bowl for Saquon Barkley to play. I think we've made our positions on that abundantly clear. But that led to the discussion that we led off the show with, which was if we have indeed seen the Eagles starters for the last time in the regular season, is there anything left that you need to see? Any questions left unanswered? Any major concerns heading into the postseason? I haven't heard any at all today from our texters, anyone on the phone line. I haven't thought of any. I haven't seen any on social media. It's very rare that we head into the postseason without this feeling of angst as a Philadelphia sports fan. And it feels like we're doing, listen, the Sixers, back when they locked up the 1 seed years ago in the best regular season that the Joel Embiid era has seen, there was angst heading into the postseason. The Phillies this past year, second best record in baseball, won their division heading into the postseason. There was plenty of angst. There's every single year that there is an expectation placed on a Philadelphia sports team, it always comes with some type of major question or concern or worry, whether founded or unfounded. And this year, just with the Philadelphia Eagles, it doesn't exist.
Well, there shouldn't be any angst. The Eagles have the NFL's top defense. They're taking the football away at a remarkable clip. And offensively, they're going to get their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, back. And the final checkbox that you wanted to see was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, in which Jalen Hurts threw for 290 yards and put on a passing clinic. It's a very well-rounded football team, and they are hitting their stride at the right time, whereas a team like the Detroit Lions, as we talked about earlier, Connor, I feel as though they peaked too early.
Yeah, and it certainly does seem that way when we look at what they've been doing lately in the tight games they've been playing against lesser competition. Now, part of not peaking too early is maintaining consistent play going into the postseason. That can turn around real quick. We saw in the blink of an eye when the Eagles played the Washington Commanders, this fan base not completely turn, but start to question the defense. And then you're forced to have another opportunity against Dallas where your defense has to prove that they are as good as they seemed. And lucky for us, or rather good by the Eagles defense, that they went out there and they did that. There's no doubt left about the caliber of this defense in basically every scenario. Like, every team can have a one-off bad game. Every unit can have a one-off bad game. But the defense had the opportunity to go out and show, hey, we're still legit. We just had a bad week. There's a guy, though, that has not really had that opportunity. So Jalen Hurts had a great game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Was throwing the ball like crazy, did exactly what people wanted to see him do after all of the criticism of the passing game following the win over the Carolina Panthers, where A.J. Brown said passing has been a problem for the offense. And then following that, remedying of that against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he goes down with a concussion 11 plays into the game in Washington. You lose that game. Now, the passing offense, you could argue you've seen enough just based on what Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee were able to do on Sunday. Like, if they can do that, Jalen Hurts can do that. I feel very confident in that fact. But there may be some people who look at Hurts missing basically the whole game against the Washington Commanders and then being out with concussion protocol restrictions against the Dallas Cowboys. And now we're advocating for him to rest in the final week of the regular season. That would be 1, 2, basically 3 straight weeks where Jalen Hurts does not play significant football. And that, to me, feels like a lot going into a postseason where the margin for error is thin, playing a team like the Green Bay Packers who can play you to a tough game. Like, convince me why that shouldn't be a worry, the potential rust that Jalen Hurts could have.
Well, Jalen Hurts has played a lot of football. He's played over 900 snaps this season, over 930 snaps this season. And so a lot of the conversation that we've even had it on this very program, Connor, going into the season was, I know you and Andrew and John were asking, should the Eagles play the starters in the preseason? John was very adamant about the Eagles playing the starters, and to me, I didn't think the risk was worth the reward, and I didn't think the rust was going to have any ramifications in the early start of the season, and it really didn't. So the fact that there was that long layoff, and they were able to take the game in Brazil and execute a pretty competent passing attack. Yes, there were a couple turnovers in there, but I thought by and large it was very rhythmic. The passing game was rhythmic, and they're able to move the football up and down the field. That should give you all the confidence that you need to, if you have any trepidation about there being any rust.
Yeah, I don't love that we could roll into a NFC wildcard matchup with Jalen Hurts having not really played meaningful football in a month, or close to it. That doesn't feel great. Like, if I was looking at any other player in any other scenario, and I understand, the reason why we're having this conversation is because the Eagles have been good enough that they don't need to play in Week 18. But, let's take that out of the equation. Let's say it was injury. Let's say they wanted to hold him out another week due to precautionary concussion stuff, and they needed this game, and they go out and win it, or whatever the case may be. If you have your quarterback, if any other team in football was rolling into the postseason saying our starting quarterback has not really played he hasn't played a full game in a month, wouldn't that be a worry? I don't know how I can look past this and say I'm 100% confident that he's going to look great from the jump in the wild card round of the NFC playoffs.
Now, I'm expecting a lot of folks to have those concerns, express the same concerns that you are, Connor. You're not alone in that.
Okay, so I'm not crazy.
No. You're not alone in that at all. But just me knowing how, and being around the team, knowing how practices are run, there's a lot more volume into the practice. There's a lot more required this year compared to last year. And he's also getting mental reps. He's also been getting a lot of mental reps over the past, X amount of weeks, which counts for something. So you're not getting those physical reps, but he's gotten plenty of those throughout the season. I don't think that there's going to be any sort of a rust factor when he does take the field for the first time in 3 or 4 weeks.
All right, so credit to me then, because here's what I'm going to do. A lot of people need to do this themselves, and I'm going to give you a great example of what looking into your own opinion and basically relegating yourself to the logical response. I could easily say that Jalen Hurts, because I'm scared of the rust, needs to play like a quarter, a drive, maybe a half against the New York Giants on Sunday to make me feel better. That would make me feel better. I would feel good about that. I would want that to happen because I would like to see him just go out there and be in a position to not prove anything, but just get a little bit loose for the postseason. But I know it's not in the best interest of this team to put him at risk and play him. Like, I know that is just like, if not more important than the Saquon Barkley conversation. Like, the quarterback, as good as Saquon Barkley has been, Jalen Hurts is probably still the number one player that you got to have on this offensive side of the ball. Like, I know I'm opening myself up now to the Kenny Pickett looked good, Tanner McKee looked good type of conversation, but if I'm going to argue not to play Saquon, I can't argue that Jalen Hurts' worry about rust is any more important than like the record or anything like that. You have to sit him. So this is the prime example. I believe that Jalen Hurts could benefit from playing Sunday. I would like to see that, all things equal, if I was completely in control of the universe. But I know it's not the best thing for the team, so I am totally comfortable with living with that worry, just like everybody else should be totally comfortable with living with Saquon Barkley as a 2,000-yard rusher, but not the NFL's all-time leader.
Good point. So my counterpoint would always be, look at Nick Foles back in 2017. He finished out the season. That was some of the worst quarterbacking I've seen in Christmas Day against the Raiders, and that Dallas game that we talked about that was 6-0, that I think they lost that game. Then they play the Falcons. He starts out very rusty, and he eventually hits his stride. I think that eventually you start to become who you are and you find your rhythm. So I would not have any sort of concern about the rust, but that's just me.
Here's I'll counterpoint your counterpoint. We could just counterpoint all day. That's kind of the whole medium anyway. But when I look at what happened in that Falcons game, I do not love the idea of Julio Jones getting targeted from like 6 yards out in the end zone with a chance to win that game and having that shot at the end of the game because Nick Foles didn't play his best game. Like, I don't love it.
Nick and Jalen aren't even on the same playing field. Jalen's head and shoulders above Nick from a talent standpoint. But my point is just, you could play the last couple of games of the season and then still come out rusty.
But
so, I don't know.
Jalen Hurts in 2022, he did have the injury late, and he missed the game against the Cowboys and the Saints. Those two games back-to-back after the shoulder injury.
And then he had to come back because Gardner Minshew couldn't take care of business.
Right, and he came back, and then they hit the postseason. Like, he was rolling heading into the postseason. And I don't know how much that contributed. He could have, if he had missed that final game of the regular season, he could have done the same exact thing, and they could have smoked the New York Giants, and they could have smoked the San Francisco 49ers and rolled right into the Super Bowl the same way that they did. Like, I'm not saying it would have made a difference, but I'm saying that in 2022, he did get that opportunity, and they played really well in the postseason, and it's hard to believe that wasn't, like, some factor. The problem is, how much of a factor was it? Was it 1% of the equation or 10% of the equation? And we're not going to know. Like, these are all hypothetical conversations about what could be and how you set yourself best up for the potential of a tough game against the Green Bay Packers and a long postseason run, we hope. I can't be hypocritical and say Jalen Hurts needs to play to knock off rust, but then yell at the fan base who wants to, like the part of the fan base who wants to play Saquon Barkley for a record. That would be unfair. If you're going to rest the starters, you're going to rest the starters. And if I'm going to say the Super Bowl is the most important, it's the most important. And if I'm going to avoid unnecessary risk with Saquon, I'm going to do it with Jalen and Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson and Lane Johnson and everybody on the offense and the defense, for that matter, of the Philadelphia Eagles when it comes to the starters.
Look at you talking yourself through it.
I mean, you have to. That's just more, I want to show people my thought process to know that I don't think you're insane for wanting Saquon Barkley to play, but you have to go through these conversations with yourself as a fan. You have to understand that sometimes, as someone who roots for a team, right? In any sport, especially in Philadelphia and especially with the Eagles. Like, this is the highest tier of irrational fandom, Philadelphia Eagles fandom. And that's what makes us great. And it also is what makes us dangerous to ourselves sometimes. You have to understand that your first thought may not always be logical, and you have to process through what the right way to handle this is. And with the Saquon thing, it seems like people are beginning to process that him playing Sunday is not in the best interest of the team, and it's not something that they should do. Now, I want to give you the floor, because this is something that you brought up wanting to talk about, and I'm very interested in your breakdown of this. You said that player development for the Philadelphia Eagles has been an incredible strong suit this year, and I could not agree with you more. But I want you to talk to me about, and talk to the people about, of course, our listeners, about who you're talking about specifically as far as players that have been developed, who is responsible for their development, and why it's so important to the Eagles this year.
So the obvious reasons for why the Eagles have been so successful this season are Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, Jalen Hurts taking a big step forward and evolving as a quarterback, Nick Sirianni growing as a coach. But if you look a little bit deeper into it, when you look back at the 2023 Eagles, what player got better? Who improved? I would say maybe Jordan Mailata. But you have to think about it. You have to rack your brain to find an answer to that question.
You could argue like Jalen Carter,
but he was a rookie, and his play tailed off towards the end of the season.
That's a fair point.
So there was a ton of regression across the board. But if you look at it this year, going into the season, what were we talking about? Nakobe Dean, was he going to be ready to step up and be a starter? Zach Bond, he was an unknown entity.
He might be the biggest one, honestly.
Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, they were both heavily scrutinized about their conditioning and whether or not they were ready to take on a larger role in the absence of Fletcher Cox. Reed Blankenship stepping up after he didn't have his best season. C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You look across the board, 2 rookie corners. I would say that they definitely have, when you look at, I forgot to mention Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith's another player who, going into this year, there were a lot of folks that didn't think that he was going to be a starting caliber player or make much of an impact in his second season. So now you look across the board. Nolan Smith's their best pass rusher. Nakobe Dean, you could argue, is going to be an all-pro. Definitely a Pro Bowler. Zach Bond probably will be an all-pro. You have to look at Bobby King for that, the linebackers coach. He's taken a position that was probably everyone had circled, and it was heavily scrutinized, and now that's a position of strength. Defensive line, those 2 players, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. I think Clint Hurt, the defensive line coach, deserves a lot of credit for working with them and helping them realize their potential. And then on the back end, defensive backs coach Christian Parker, taking 2 corners in Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and helping them refine their skill set at a very difficult position to the point to where teams are avoiding throwing to Quinyon Mitchell's side
in their
field.
rookie years. It's such a tough spot in the NFL. It's incredibly impressive.
And so you look across the board, and there's so many different players that have taken steps forward and have grown and have played pivotal roles for the 2024 Eagles. Grant Calcaterra, Fred Johnson, Cam Jurgens. Cam Jurgens played over 1,000 snaps this year and is playing at an extremely high level. I mean, I think you have to look at that and say that has been a huge component to the Eagles being so successful.
I mean, yeah, you could put Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on a team and say, okay, we'll figure out a way to win 7 or 8 games, 9 or 10 games, build a good offensive line around them, and you have a great offense. But a lot of those players you were talking about were on the defensive side of the ball. We know the struggles that they had last year in spite of having a talented offense because the defense was terrible and they weren't being coached the right way. And now, to get to the level that the Philadelphia Eagles have gotten to, you have to find diamonds in the rough. And they've found multiple this year. And while a lot of them are on the defensive side of the ball, that kind of tracks considering Vic Fangio is the guy that should have been here all along in the wake of Jonathan Gannon and got here a year late. But still, so much credit to the coaching staff in every position for what they've been able to do this year. It's a great point by you. And development is how you speed up a rebuild. That's what the Philadelphia Eagles, not they were rebuilding, they were more retooling, but that's what they did this offseason. So a great point as to what is leading to why the Eagles have been successful this year. Speaking of rebuilds and setting up a roster and everything, we got some work to put in still on this breakdown of the worst and best teams as far as situations are concerned around the NFL. This next segment, we're going to round everything out. We're going to roll through that list, and we're going to get as many done as we can there without trying to split too many hairs because it is a bit of a heavy exercise. But we can get through that and figure out where the Eagles rank. So we'll do that coming up. The key three will come your way in our final segment. So still a lot of stuff to get into here on Kincade and Salciunas. I'm Connor Thomas. We're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to yours.
Hey, it's Ricky Bowe from 97.5 The Fanatic, the best show ever. I want to wish all of you very happy holidays and a fantastic new year upcoming.
Hey, everybody. Rich Ivanisi from 97.5 The Fanatic Sales Department. I'd like to wish all of our...
Kincade Salciunas is presented to you by The Bagster. It's a dumpster in a bag. You can get yours today at Home Depot and Lowe's. You need details? Go to bagster.com.
Sometimes you got to just work through the break, put in a little bit of overtime, and that's what me and Andrew DeCecco were just doing as we work through the situational rankings for NFL teams looking towards the future. This is not the power rankings. This is not this year. This is not best chance to win the Super Bowl. This is who would you rather be? Like, who would you swap spots? The idea with this is if you're at, like, 30th in the rankings, you would swap spots with a team who's at 29th. Well, we've determined, like, the Titans would be 30th and the New Orleans Saints would be 29th. Basically, this is a look at what the future holds, and it's a talk about sustainability, and we knew the Eagles were going to be near the top of this list. So what we did is we have now gotten it to the top 7 teams need to be ranked. But here are our rankings for worst to best spots considering the future that Andrew and I just ran through. Brendan Gunn, you will be our executor. So if there's anything on this list where you're like, whoa, how did that happen? Feel free to chime in as I roll through this.
All right, sounds good.
The worst situation in the NFL is the New York Giants. The Las Vegas Raiders, 31st. Titans, 30th. The New Orleans Saints, 29th. The Carolina Panthers, 28th. The Cleveland Browns, 27th. Then we're going with the Jacksonville Jaguars at 26th. A lot of money committed to the quarterback position. Probably going to lose your head coach there. Not enough talent on that roster. Chicago Bears, 25. That organization is a mess, even if you believe Caleb Williams could be good. The Indianapolis Colts at 24. They don't know if Anthony Richardson is the guy, and they're also in a situation where they just keep, every time they get close to accomplishing something, they choke it away. The Arizona Cardinals at 23. The New York Jets at 22.
That was the team I was waiting for, was the New York Jets. Because every time I'm like, they don't have anybody there. They have...
What do you mean they don't have anybody?
Aaron Rodgers is there. They have Sauce Gardner, who's not happy. He's
Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson.
Breece Hall's a little bit overrated. Garrett Wilson's not happy. Like,
right, but they have playmakers there. Yeah, they have talent, and they need the right quarterback and infrastructure in place.
But do they have too much talent where they're going to have to pay the talent before they ever get a quarterback and then find themselves in a position where... Where do you go from there?
These are all fair questions, but I think the talent that they have outweighs teams. Like Arizona doesn't have a long-term quarterback. I don't think anyone's looking at Kyler Murray as like the long-term guy there. Indianapolis doesn't have a quarterback answer. Chicago doesn't know. Jacksonville's paid too much for a guy that looks like they aren't. Like at least the Jets have more talent on their roster than those teams. That's why they're where they are.
Yeah, I mean the Bears though coming into the season, people thought they had a ton of talent on that roster.
And guess what?
And it didn't work out. Yeah, I mean people were wrong about the Jets too.
Yes, but like Garrett Wilson is undeniably a great wide receiver. Like he's a very, very good wide receiver. So is Devontae Adams. Sauce Gardner is a monster back there in the defensive secondary. Like they're more a product of the organization than the talent. So they have like more upside, I would argue. And also,
yeah, I mean, it's just hard because they are the Jets and they always find themselves in.
Yeah, but if we're doing the Cowboys would be 32. If we're doing they're always this, they're always that. Like we do have to be a little bit rational with what the players look like now.
That's fair.
Next up, speaking of the Cowboys, they're at 21, one spot above the Jets. They're not in a good spot at all. Like they have to they paid Dak way too much money. Yeah. They're heading in the wrong direction. This is an interesting one. The 49ers at 20. And part of that is because they have a big question as to whether or not to play Brock Purdy. If you don't, well, you're quarterback searching again, which is not a good place to be. If you do, you're paying a guy that doesn't seem to be able to get you over the hump. That's a tough spot to be in. That is a quarterback question. That's why they're at 20.
And Kyle Shanahan, we don't know what's going to become of his situation.
Exactly. Tough year for them. The Atlanta Falcons at 19. They've got a lot of money owed to Kirk Cousins. That's probably a team you could bump down a little bit more, but they're a postseason team with their current situation, and they were seemingly smart to draft Michael Penix. I don't know if that was smart or dumb or lucky, but they at least have a young guy that they can evaluate now, and they've made that decision. Yes. Like, they made the call to go to him, too, which is a good call. Seahawks at 18. They're just a middle-of-the-pack team. Miami at 17. Pittsburgh Steelers at 16. The big reason why they're there is because they don't have a true quarterback setup for the future. Don't know what Justin Fields is long-term as a starter. Russell Wilson will not play for that much longer. And their offense doesn't seem to have a good path to being great if they can't figure out that quarterback.
Is there still a world where the Steelers miss the playoffs, DeCecco?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
They just do not have a ton of offensive firepower there. I mean, George Pickens, Freiermuth's okay, but if either one of those players miss time, they have and they have a ton of trouble moving the football, as we saw just a few weeks ago.
And now we're into the part where we're talking about postseason teams this year. So these are good teams as we get to the top half of the rankings. Tampa Bay at 15. They have some players on that roster that are aging out, and also Baker Mayfield, while he's a good quarterback, he's not one of these top elite guys that you believe is like a perennial Super Bowl contender, or at least I don't think we do. So they're at 15. The Rams at 14. They had a nice year. Matt Stafford's old, man. And if he walks away, and who knows how long, there have been rumors about McVay walking away forever now. They're a totally different team without Matt Stafford. The Denver Broncos at 13. Credit to Denver. Sean Payton has that team playing well, and Bo Nix is a guy that you should have a lot of faith in.
Yeah, without the Eagles defense existing, too, that Denver defense might be the best in the league. They're solid.
Call.
Yes. Yeah. Great point there. The Los Angeles Chargers at 12. The reason they're ahead of Denver is just more proven quarterback. Also, a head coach that I think can rival Sean Payton and Harbaugh. He's done an incredible job turning that organization around. They look like they're ready to move into the future with contention purposes. The Houston Texans at 11. The Minnesota Vikings at 10, simply because Sam Darnold's not the long-term answer and they don't know about J.J. McCarthy. Or maybe Sam Darnold is, but they have to make that decision. And being in a place where you have to choose means there is a potential wrong choice to be made. The Commanders at 9. They've got the Offensive Rookie of the Year in Jaden Daniels. They can build around that quarterback. They have new ownership. They have a head coach in Dan Quinn that has made a Super Bowl before, so they're in a solid spot. The Cincinnati Bengals at 8. We moved the Bengals up just for transparency to everyone out there listening. We had the Bengals at 13 originally. Just every team we kept coming up with, I'm like, yeah, but they got Joe Burrow. Yeah, but they got Joe Burrow. Just over and over and over again.
We're bullish on the Bengals.
If you got Joe Burrow, you've always got a chance. I would take that position to be in every time.
Yeah, and until today, everybody thought they would have to let go of Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. And T. Higgins came out today and said, well, if I would take a hometown discount a little tiny bit because I get a lot more things my way playing with the Joe Burrow and with the Jamar Chase. So he kind of opened that door a little bit.
All right, so we have 7 spots open now that we have not yet done. I want to do these on air and kind of talk through this. So the teams we have remaining for the final 7 spots: Kansas City, Detroit, Buffalo, Baltimore, Green Bay, the Philadelphia Eagles, and I must be missing. Did I say hit all 7 there? I think I hit all. But those are the
no math here.
Yeah, no math here. No, those are the teams that. Oh, and the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, those are the teams that we're looking at to round this out. So, of those teams, this is going to be really tough to pick. I might have to go in the long-term view. I'll probably go Green Bay because Jordan Love.
I agree there, Cotter.
Okay, why not?
I'll put them a little bit higher. Jordan Love, young quarterback. They have a young nucleus of wide receivers that I think are going to continue to get better. Their offensive line has some interesting pieces there, including Jordan Morgan, their first-round pick out of Arizona. Okay. Josh Jacobs, well, he's a little bit older for a running back as far as they go, but I think defensively there's also some cornerstone pieces that they can continue to build around.
Well, this is tough then because what do you go Detroit because Jared Goff long term you have questions about?
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Detroit at 7.
That's what I was thinking.
It's so hard.
Or Baltimore.
Let's put Baltimore there. And the reason I want to put Baltimore there and not Detroit is because the talent surrounding Jared Goff is not only proven, but they're young. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown still has a lot of years left. Aiden Hutchinson has a lot of years left. Jahmyr Gibbs has a lot of years left. Sam Laporta, a lot of years left. Like the core of that team is not going anywhere anytime soon. So even if it is Jared Goff long term, they're going to be continually competitive. Now I can put them at. I don't think I could put Green Bay in a worse spot than Detroit. Or in a better spot than Detroit, I should say.
Long term, though.
No.
Long term, I think Green Bay is going to be a force.
Yeah, what's the window on the long term? Like 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. I think
sure.
that's fair.
Yeah. Let's do. Okay, fine. So then long term, Green Bay is a force. We'll put the Lions at 6, Green Bay at 5, and those are interchangeable. And now we're into the top 4. Now we're into a spot where we have to start considering your Philadelphia Eagles. So the teams that we have remaining are going to be Philly, Kansas City, Buffalo. Like, what in the world do we do with those 3 teams? How do we rank those teams out? I don't know how you compare the positions with MVP caliber players at the quarterback position and so much talent around them. I can't say Kansas City's not one. Is anyone?
That's what I was going to say. Kansas City has to be one.
Well, let's just get that out of the way.
So let's put that there. Are the Eagles 2, or would you rather be in the spot that the Buffalo Bills are in? I think the talent of the Eagles roster is better than Buffalo's overall. Are the Philadelphia Eagles the second best setup team for the future in the NFL?
They are.
So we'll put them at 2. Then Buffalo's got to be 3, right?
Yep.
All right. So there you have it. I mean, listen, we're in a situation where you have not only a team competing. Like, you look at some of these teams. The Vikings are having a great year. They're barely in the top 10 right now. The Denver Broncos are having a strong year. They're at 13. The Rams are the 4 seed right now. Or, sorry, the 3 seed. They're at 14. Tampa Bay, who everyone's scared of, is at 15. Pittsburgh, who looks so good, we've got them at 16. There are so many teams that their record looks good this year, and then you say, is this their big shot? Is this their one chance? And it's really not as good of a one as the Eagles have, because the Eagles are the 2 seed. Like, all of this to get to a point where you just say, the Philadelphia Eagles are not only good right now, they're as well set up for the future as any team that doesn't have Patrick Mahomes in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think this exercise really accents that. But just to be clear for those listening, we're saying which teams are set up for long-term success. And we've outlined a number of reasons, and I think it's kind of hard. Look, we're splitting hairs here. There's going to be varying opinions, but I think we got it pretty close.
Yes, absolutely. I think we were right about online with where everything should be. So that should make you feel good, Eagles fans, for looking forward. The reason we have the opportunity to do that is because Sunday's game against the Giants doesn't matter. So we don't have to break down, hey, what is Drew Lock going to do against the Eagles defense? We have a chance to kind of pat ourselves on the back, or rather pat Howie Roseman on his back for where he set up this team for long-term success. The Eagles are doing this, but they're also doing this with the future in mind. It reminds me of a team from 2 years ago, and not the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll tell you who I'm talking about coming up next. We'll also have the Kincade Salciunas Key 3 as we wrap up today's show. I'm Connor Thomas sitting in for Andrew Salciunas, Andrew DeCecco to my left, Brendan Gunn on the board. We're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Happy holidays from the Fanatic family to yours.
Hi, I'm Joe McKinnon.
segment of Kincade and Salciunas. Before we hand things over to the folks on Middays, the Mike Missanelli Show comes your way next. We've had a busy day focusing around on a lot of stuff. Now, I brought up just before we went to break a comparison between the Eagles and a team from 2022, talking about how the Eagles are good, but they're also really well set up for the future. It very much reminds you of that 2022 Chiefs team that had the young studs on defense that showed up in the defensive secondary, and they had some young players. It's like, okay, we can project out. We have a good mix of veterans and young players filling gaps. We're going to be good for a while. All the Chiefs did was win the Super Bowl in 2022, win the Super Bowl in 2023, and now in the 2024 season, they're looking like they're poised to repeat with the top seed in the AFC. Pretty good team to compare yourself to, huh?
Yeah, and you're thinking of Bolton, the linebacker. You're thinking of Trent McDuffie, the younger players on that Super Bowl team for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, the Eagles are very reminiscent of that team in terms of adding those young playmakers on that side of the ball.
Now, the reason that team holds the type of weight that they have is because they finished the job. And the Eagles still have a ways to go to win their first Super Bowl with this core, and then you'd have to do it again to equal. Like, they're a long way from where the Chiefs find themselves today. But there are comparisons that make you feel good about that. Now, real quick before we get to the key three, I just want your opinion. Who plays quarterback on Sunday if Hurts doesn't play? Is it McKee? Is it Kenny Pickett?
No, I don't think you put Kenny Pickett back out there with the rib injury. I think you let him rest as well. I think it would be Tanner McKee, and then eventually Ian Book would probably take over from there. That would be probably the most sound approach to that.
Sounds logical. I just know people think backup, so they think Kenny Pickett goes back out there and gets another opportunity. I think it'd be smart to make sure he's good to go. Just in case anything crazy happens in the postseason, you need to have Kenny Pickett ready to go. Throw Tanner McKee out there. And, hey, hopefully he ups maybe his value for a future trade potential.
And for those wondering, Ian Book signed to the Eagles 53. He wasn't elevated. So he's still, at least as we sit here right now, on the Eagles roster.
So he's eligible to be active on Sunday without a roster move having to be made.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Well, without further ado, let's get into the Kincade and Salciunas Key 3, the best 3 minutes of today's show, presented by Von C.
Now, the Kincade and Salciunas Key 3, today's best.
You would be the number one guy that I would want to ask if there are any questions left unanswered. And as fate has it, you're the guy sitting next to me today. So lead us off on this topic. Is there anything left that you would have wanted to see, anything you need to see, or is everything wrapped up with a nice bow just a couple days after Christmas?
No, I mean, prior to the Steelers game, Connor, I would say that the one thing I wanted to see was the passing game look more rhythmic, look more functional, and not as choppy as maybe it has been for most of the season. But they checked off that box as well. There's nothing else that I need to see to really skew my opinion one way or the other. This is a bona fide Super Bowl roster. I view the Eagles as the best team in the NFL. Perhaps I'm a bit close to it, a bit too close to it, having seen them grow and develop as a team from the spring all the way through training camp and to this point right now. But I don't think they need to prove anything else. I think right now the primary objective should be sit your starters, especially that offensive line that have been dominant this year. A lot of those guys have been nicked up, and then focus on the postseason because, as it appears, they have a really tough draw in Game 1.
Should the starters play? Should Saquon play? I know that we haven't exactly solved that problem amongst the Philadelphia Eagles fans. There are still a contingency of this fan base that believes that Saquon should go after the record and the coaching staff should allow him to. But we are in agreement that Sunday would be a good time to get rest and try and avoid injury, and the only way to guarantee that is by not playing anybody. So we could have seen the Philadelphia Eagles starters and basically any player that matters play for the final time in the regular season. The Sixers have made a little bit of noise, and I don't want to let this show go by without talking about another win by them last night. Joel Embiid goes for 37-9. They take down the Portland Trailblazers. The Sixers, if you haven't been paying attention, have won 4 straight games, and they've won 6 of their last 7. They are starting to look more like a team that we thought they could be. If I'm trying to find a question about the Philadelphia Eagles, and I am, because I don't feel comfortable going into the NFL playoffs, knowing how difficult it is to make a Super Bowl run, to hoist the Lombardi. Only one time in franchise history, in case you've forgotten, have the Eagles accomplished that feat. There's got to be like something that we're looking at where we say, okay, this is something to focus on. It doesn't feel good to feel good. And maybe that's the Philadelphia in it. But to say, yeah, we got no problems. We're as good as any team in football. We're comfortable with everything heading into the postseason. does make me feel like we're overlooking things, but logic would dictate that that is the way you should feel about this team. So if I had to pick a question, I don't even think I can go with the defensive young players. I don't think I could bring up like a rookie wall. That might have been something that people were worried about after the Washington game. What they did against Dallas, I know, not the world's greatest offense there with Cooper Rush leading it and no CeeDee Lamb. It was still an incredible performance by the defense, and they're starting to take the ball away at an incredible rate. I could question the
pass rush.
Yeah.
Pass rush, perhaps.
The Eagles just seem to, every time this year, they've had a major question brought up about a certain part of the team. Not only have they answered it, they've answered it like immediately the next game.
Resounding fashion.
Exactly. All right, there it is. The Kincade and Salciunas Key 3 brought to you by Von C. And you got to check out their Key 3, Von C Brewing Company in Norristown. Their Key 3 is the OG Pills Legendary Philly Lager, a gold medal winner at the 2023 World Beer Cup for Best American Pilsner. They're Walking on Clouds, Von C's flagship hazy IPA. Got a bunch of buddies who are big hazy IPA guys. I got to get them some of those. Mm-hmm. And the Vienna Lager, a two-time Best of PA winner, made with all German ingredients. Visit VonCBrewing.com and find out where you can pick up your Key 3 from Von C today. On Thursday, we will be back to the normal show. So Andrew will be in the seat that I'm currently in. John Kincade in the seat that Andrew DeCecco is currently in. And you'll get German John again for the Von C read. So if you've been missing that during the holiday season, don't worry. He'll be back on Thursday. I'll be back on the board. So thank you to everybody who took the time to help us all fill in. Everyone who's been a rotating cast on this show, including you, of course, Andrew DeCecco. Great show today. Great work.
Yes, sir. Thank
doing
you.
Everything around this station. The holidays are always the time where you get a chance for people to fill in and pick up the slack, and we've had people do a great job on this show. Thank you to everybody who's listened through the holidays as well and spent it with us. The next time we talk to you will be in 2025. But real quick before we're out of here.
Yeah, remember to support life-saving cancer research. Join me and our generous partner, Pierce Phelps Bryant Heating and Air Conditioning Contractors, in making a donation to the American Association for Cancer Research today at 975thefanatic.com/AACR. Cancer research saves lives.
So we are all off tomorrow for the New Year's Day holiday. Enjoy it once again tonight. When you're out celebrating, be safe, make smart decisions. Start your new year on a good note. Make sure you have a ride. Get where you need to get safely. Thank you again to everybody for listening to us through the holiday season. We'll all be back on Thursday. The Mike Missanelli Show, full show's back for them. So Mike is back from his vacation. Bill Colarulo and Ray Dunn come your way next, right here, 97.5 The Fanatic.